Welcome to Recovering from Religion Stories Australia. This podcast features long-form conversations with people who have left religion, sharing their journeys both in and out of belief. Recovering from Religion is a global non-profit offering support, healing, and community for people harmed by religion. Some episodes touch on sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. The views expressed are those of the speakers and don't necessarily reflect the views of Recovering from Religion. We're glad you're here.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of RFR Stories. Greetings from Western Australia. My name is Shawn, and I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by the lovely Sally-Ann.
Hi, Shawn.
How are you?
I'm good. Doing really well today.
Thanks for joining me for this and opening your home to this interview. And today we are joined by the one and only Darrel Ray. Darrel, thanks for joining us. We're very excited to have you here.
I'm glad to be here and glad to talk to you folks.
So for those who don't know, Darrel is the founder of Recovering from Religion, and we are very thrilled to have him here and to have the opportunity to hear a more lengthy version of your personal story and your relationship with religion as it's panned out. So for those who aren't familiar with the podcast, the idea here is to give people adequate space to unpack and discuss and share about their experience with religion and their religious story. So, Darrel, we've heard bits and pieces of your story as you've been interviewed in various places over the years, but we've never quite heard it all into one coherent set of stories or elements. So we're really thrilled to have you here. And I guess the starting point would be to ask you, where does it begin? What religion were you raised in, and where were you raised? And tell us a bit about that.
You know, when you said I could start anywhere, I was thinking, well, I was born in 1950, but my story starts about 1929 when my father was born. And he was born. And the reason I go clear back there is because I want to talk later, as we've already mentioned, about religious trauma. And I want to use my own family as a example of intergenerational religious trauma that goes over at least 3 and maybe 4 generations. So my story starts in 1929, but I won't start there now. We'll come back to that when we talk about my family and trauma. But yeah, I was born into a fairly conservative, I won't call them fundamentalist, because we made fun of the fundamentalists in my church. I was raised in the Independent Christian Church, which was a movement that came out of the Great Revival of the 1820s here in the United States. Carmelite, they were called Carmelites. And I was raised in that tradition. It was baptism by immersion. It wasn't it was conservative, but not fundamentalist in the sense that it had a degree of tolerance, except my grandmother. My grandmother knew that everybody else was going to hell except her and the church that she went to. And hopefully that was hopefully a few more. I'm not sure she ever let anybody else in, but it'll be clear why I'm mentioning my grandmother later as well. Mm. So I had a really good childhood. I look back and think I have an enviable childhood. There were 4 boys in my family. I'm the oldest of 4 boys. While my parents were religious and we were in church 3 times a week, it wasn't insufferable. It didn't suffocate us. And the proof of that is that now I've had, like I said, there are 4 boys. Not one of us will darken the door of a church. So that my parents were rather unsuccessful in propagating the God virus, as I write about in my book, Propagating the God Virus, to the four sons that they had. But I was a very curious child. I read lots of books. In fact, my mom sometimes complained I needed to go outside and play more because I was reading books too much. And but I read all sorts of books. I was really into science as a kid. I loved taking science courses and doing science experiments. I had a chemistry set in my bedroom, and I came close to burning the whole house down with my chemistry set one time.
Wow.
There was trauma there because I'm thinking, oh shit, how do I put this fire out? Fortunately, it was an alcohol fire, and alcohol only burns at about 600 degrees Fahrenheit. So it wasn't hot enough to really start a whole lot of other fire. I got it put out and never did that experiment again.
Non-repeatable experiment.
Yeah, let's not repeat that experiment. It could have been repeated, but that would have been a bad idea to try to replicate that experiment. So I had a lot of fun as a child. We were outside a lot. We'd go fishing, we'd go hunting. I grew up with a gun in my hand. We'd go pheasant hunting, we'd go deer hunting. My father was a big outdoor sportsman. My father was not athletic. Only one of us in the family, my second brother, was really that athletic. And even he wasn't like star quality or anything. We were all in good shape. We played outside and I actually was I pitched men's fast pitch softball for 20 years. So I was that athletic. I wasn't the star of the team or anything, but I was pretty good. And I did enjoy athletics. I tried to get on the swimming team for my high school a couple of years in a row, and I got cut. The last person to get cut both years was me. I was so hopeful I would make the team.
Yeah.
So that tells you, I'm almost athletic, but not quite.
Almost athletic.
Almost, but not quite.
Yeah. But that is something I've done all my life is exercise. I exercise. Yesterday I went out and ran my normal 2 miles, or I almost always run 2 miles at least 3 or 4 times a week, and sometimes 3 or 4 miles. But I'm not setting any land speed record, but I am running, and at 75 years of age, that's probably pretty good.
Pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah. I have a motto my motto is I don't know when I'm going to die, but I'm going to die healthy.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Yes.
I was at a party a couple of weeks ago at a friend's house, and a guy, one of my friends that was there, I was telling him, I mentioned that, and he says, "Yeah, it's really embarrassing when you don't die of anything." I don't know.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast a few months ago, and someone was speaking about the importance of exercise in age, and they were specifically talking about like doing triathlons and whatnot in their 80s, and I did find it very inspirational. So I think I'm there with you on that commitment.
So
that's great.
Get out there and do exercise.
Yeah, exercise so good for physical health, good for mental health. I think we often forget that the brain is a physical organ, and I'm sure you've had that experience in your entire life, that your brain, your thoughts are much clearer after exercising, much more settled. Yeah, just resolves a lot of things.
I resolve a lot of my emotional issues when I'm out running, because my brain just seems to keep going. It's a good thing. I'm very much into it. I'm not a radical. I'm not a fanatic about exercise, but I am regular at it, and I think that's about the best medicine a human being can have throughout your lifetime. I did run I ran 3 triathlons when I was in my 30s, but I traveled so much for my career. It was hard for me to do that kind of intense training. But anyway, back to where I was. By about 12 years old, I was pretty, I was showing a lot of interest in science. I was reading constantly.
Wait, so I'd like to ask some questions about your religion of origin. So you said it's called the Carmelites. It would tell us more about the faith and its beliefs and worldview, and perhaps draw some distinctions between that and other faiths that are around in the environment.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure I really thought about that much. Well, it was, like I said, baptism was the way to go. I was taught that those people down the street that were Baptists were probably going to hell because they baptized more than once. I got a lot of my theology or religious training not from my parents, but from my grandmother on my dad's mother. She was like the religious person, most fundamentalist, rigid religious person, and so we were. And I won't tell you her story as much as I'll just say that she had some real trauma in her life that that made her what she was. I know, because I know what she had as a 12-year-old girl. I know what was going on in her life. So she imposes this religious ideology on us, and it was especially around alcohol. That was, if she knew you drank alcohol, she would divorce you. She would cut you out of her family. So we were told early on, never drink alcohol, and if you do, don't tell Granny. So. Unfortunately, my youngest two brothers became alcoholics and became addicts of various kinds as they got older. I did not have that problem, and neither did my second brother, who's still alive. My two youngest brothers are both deceased. They're both dead. So I'm just two boys, me and my second brother, and we're very close. He and I are very close. He only lives about 20 miles from me, and we see each other regularly. But the religion was, there were 8 different churches in the Wichita, Kansas, where I grew up in. It's the very, very center of the United States. It's about 500,000 population in the metropolitan area of Wichita. And it has the kind of halfway, had the urban influence, and it had the country influence, because it's surrounded by wheat fields, so to speak. It's very it's very rural once you get about 5 miles out of town. So I could ride my bike out and go to the river and swim in the river or fish in the river. And there was no restrictions. My mom would say, go play. Well, can we go to the big ditch, which was just a big ditch with water in it. And she'd sure be home by supper time or whatever. And we'd go out and get sunburned big time. But we weren't taught that the Bible was, we weren't taught that it was inerrant necessarily. It was not a literalist church. We had people in our church that were fine with evolution. We had people in our church that were not fine with evolution. In fact, both of my grandparents were rather upset with me when they learned that I was reading books about evolution. My parents didn't care, but my grandfather on my mother's side tried to discourage me, or tried to tell me, well, the earth is 6,000 years old, By 11 or 12 years old, I already knew that was a crock. So I don't know if that, we had a choir. I sang in the choir when I got to be old enough. We had Sunday school, of course. We had vacation Bible school. We had church camp. I participated in all those things. And when I got old enough, I became a church camp counselor. I became a Sunday school teacher. Just by way of interest, I taught evolution in Sunday school.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Wow. Go you.
And I got away with it because my father was the chairman of the board of elders in the church. And I was, so, they let me get away with shit they probably wouldn't have with anybody else. Of course, nobody would have thought to teach evolution in Sunday school except somebody as crazy as I was. But I was buying into this religious idea that you can be religious and you can believe in evolution both.
Yes, yes.
That's the way I was coming at it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was a popular Sunday school teacher. When I took the Sunday school over, it might have 4 or 5 people that didn't really want to be there. They were high school kids. I only taught the high school class at that church. And but within a few months, I'd have 10, 15 people showing up every Sunday morning. Nice. And wanting to be there. So, I'm a pretty good teacher, and I can keep people entertained usually, and that was what was going on there.
Nice.
Sorry.
I'm just trying to get a picture of so in your youth, what I'm hearing is that you had a more moderate kind of upbringing in the religion. Your grandparents were very devout. Sounds like your parents were a bit more moderate and liberal. No, some people had problem with evolution, some people didn't. And how would you characterize your levels of belief in your teenagehood? Like, very devout, praying every day, or, was it always a little bit more moderate? Like, how would you describe it?
It was always pretty moderate, but I went through some phases. I look back and I can see that I was, for example, there was always pressure for the children to get baptized. It was subtle pressure. It wasn't hard, but it was there. So I got baptized when I was 9 years old on April 9th, 1959. I mean, I remember it clearly. And the cool thing was I got baptized, and then I walked out of the church that night, got in the car to go home with my brothers and my family. I'm thinking, man, if I die right now, I'll go straight to heaven. And I got to keep this up so I don't go to hell. So I don't have to, because in our church, there wasn't anything like confession, so if I even sin once from now on, I'm SOL,
Really? Okay. So there's no repentance mechanism built into the religion, or?
Oh, yeah, there's all sorts of, yeah, there was. But
okay.
but if to a 9-year-old, I'm thinking,
Yeah. This is my chance, yeah.
And
Mom yelled at me yesterday, but I didn't. That was not a sin anymore. It's all cleared.
it's all clear up until that point.
It took me, and I turned to my friend. My best friend was in the car with me, and I told him, I'm perfect right now. I told him, he didn't appreciate that because he didn't see me as any better now than I was the day before.
He just wasn't perfect, Darrell.
No.
That was his problem.
I don't know if Steve ever got baptized. I did chide him a little bit because he should get baptized too, of course. But I wasn't big at proselytizing or anything like that. Although I did get the message that I should be out there doing it. And over the years, early in my early adulthood, I would get that feeling I should go proselytize. But I just couldn't see my way to do it. I did other things. I will tell you about those as we get into that early adulthood, because I did some interesting things, I think, that I don't get a chance to talk about too often. Anyway, by 12 years old, my aunt and uncle lived down in Gallup, New Mexico. For those look outside the U.S., it's the middle of a desert, and they lived on the Navajo Indian Reservation, and their job was working for the federal government as a principal of the Crown Point Indian School there. The Navajo Indians would come there to go to school, and they lived there. And we would go out there on usually about this time of year on Thanksgiving, several years in a row, just to visit my aunt and uncle. And my aunt and uncle were much more fundamentalist than we were. So they saw their job as paid federal employees to proselytize the Native Americans there.
Yeah.
So they really pushed Christianity, even though they shouldn't have been, even though technically they were federal employees. They did it anyway. One day, my brother and I went up to the top of the mesa. They had this mesa. A mesa is a mountain that's flat on top, for those of you outside the States. And it was 500 feet up. Pretty good climb, but 12-year-olds, nothing for that. And we're walking around the top, and we're picking up shark's teeth all over the place, just hundreds of them. And I put a bunch of these shark's teeth in a vial that I had, because I was always collecting fossils or collecting, I was always doing that. So I always had something to carry my stuff in. I come back down with my brother. I go up to my Aunt Margie and say, "Look, Aunt Margie, all these shark's teeth were on the top of that mountain. How'd they get up there?" And she said, "Well, God put them there in the flood."
Right. That was the answer.
Now, in my own mind, at the moment, I said, "You're an idiot." I mean, even I know better than that.
Gotta love a simple story.
That kind of tells you where I was, where my mind was. And I kept on that trajectory because I love science, and I still read Scientific American religiously and subscribe to a lot of online things.
So you were really passionate about science from a young age. You were reading about science. You knew about evolution. And so I'm hearing that, and obviously, you've come where you've come, so that part of you has maintained its strength and even gotten way stronger. But yeah, it sounds to me like your religiosity wasn't that strong. That's the sense I'm getting. Is that correct? Like, did you ever agonize over perceived sins or unworthiness, that kind of thing?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I was a 12-year-old, 13. I'm starting to masturbate. And I'm thinking this has got to be a sin. Nobody told me that, though. That's the interesting. We were not explicitly taught purity culture back then. The hints were there, some of the ideas were there, but it wasn't systematic like it seems to be today. And yeah, I did. I remember over a period of several years masturbating and thinking, oh, I just committed a sin. I better pray. So I would get down on my knees next to my bed and I would pray to Jesus, please forgive me, and I won't do that again. And then, of course, I did it again.
Yeah.
I'm a healthy 13-year-old boy, right?
Yeah.
I'm a healthy 75-year-old. I still masturbate. So there you go. So that was there was guilt, there was shame.
Yes.
And then when I started dating at about my ninth grade year, kind of informally, not real strong, going to church events with a girl or something. It was pretty supervised, chaperoned. Then when I got into high school, I started dating more intensely, I guess you could say. And the first girl I had sex with, I was 17, she was 16. I was a senior, she was a junior. And wow, I got kind of my mind blown because I was taught my whole life girls didn't like sex, only boys like sex. I found out she liked sex better than I did. She would not leave me alone. So, but that really brought some guilt for me. I had a hard time dealing with that, even though I was having a lot of fun. But we were sneaking around behind my parents' back, or when my parents were out of town, we'd have fun in the house or whatever.
Yeah.
It's both, right? It's this is great. I'm enjoying this. We're having a good time. We both love it, and we're covering it up. We
shouldn't be doing.
We shouldn't be doing
yeah,
this.
It's wrong.
Yeah. And did you ever discuss it with her on those terms? Like, did you say, "Oh, we need to stop," or that kind of thing?
No, I don't think I did. Not with her. That came a little bit later, but we did talk about religion a little bit, and she basically said, "I don't believe in any of that religious stuff." She was probably an atheist. I didn't know it. Anyway, that went on pretty well, but she was not interested in my religion. And I did have an interest in religion. Obviously, I'm still do today. And so also she did not want to go to college. So between those two things, she wanted to have kids immediately when she got out of high school. I don't know where I learned about it, but I learned how to use condoms. Man, I wasn't going to get a kid. I did not want that. And so I was very diligent about protection. Unfortunately, my three brothers weren't. And each one of them had a child by the time they were 17 or 18 years of age. But I didn't have that particular issue. So we broke up, and then I started dating some other people until I met my first wife. And we had a kind of a funny story. We were both religious. She was from an even more religious family than I was. I would put them as semi-fundamentalist, and they got more fundamentalist later. Her father was very strict with her, and there were three girls in that family, 4 boys in mine, 3 in hers. She was the oldest, and as a result, he really cracked down on them, and curfew at 11 o'clock, and no hanky-panky or anything. Well, that didn't slow us down really. But we went quite a while. We knew we wanted to have sex. Everybody wants to have sex. And I was 19. She was 18 when we met. I was a freshman in college. She was about ready to go into college the next year. So one night we said we're going to have sex, but we got to let Jesus bless our marriage. We knew we were going to get married. So we knelt down together in front of the bed and we prayed to Jesus that Jesus bless our marriage. And then we got in and fucked like bunny rabbits. So I tell that story and I laugh about it, but I'm sure you've heard it. I have heard that story 100 times over the years from other people. I wasn't the only one doing that. We felt like we were married in Jesus' eyes. It didn't matter what that we hadn't had the ceremony.
Yeah.
So, And then we did get married about. I think we saw each other for about a year before we got married. I was 20 and she was 19 when we got married.
Yeah, young. Yeah.
But young for now, not
back then. It wasn't considered that young, was it? That's just sort of normal.
All but one of my good friends were already married by the time I got married.
Wow.
And that person got married a year after we did, literally 1 year later.
That's even younger than the Mormons, I think, because Mormons would go on a mission from like 19 to 21. So it's usually they're getting married 21, 22, 23. But you're 20. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was just the way things were. But her family was very religious. My family was very religious. So some interesting things happened there in early those years. I was in college. I needed a job, so I worked some part-time jobs to pay for my tuition and all. When we got married, she'd always have jobs. We were pretty diligent. We studied hard. We got decent grades. We weren't straight A's, but we were high B's and A's pretty much. But I became the youth minister at Antioch Christian Church in Wichita, which is a few miles from where my other church was, my home church was. And Antioch Christian Church was a church that my parents church planted. They went over and started Antioch Christian Church about 19. My parents planted two churches, or helped plant two churches. And one was Riverside Christian Church and one was Antioch Christian Church. Well, they had long since left those churches and come back to the home church. They went home, got them started, and came home. Well, I got a job as the youth minister at the age of like 20 years old for Antioch Christian Church, and I'm doing youth group stuff. And when I start the youth group, I get 4 or 5 kids show up unwillingly. This was before the Sunday school piece I told you earlier, so I'm going to get it backwards. But I do pretty well with the youth group stuff at Antioch, but they only were paying me $5 a week, which even then was pretty bad. And so I told them, I'll do this job for a while, but if I'm successful, if I can get 10 or 20 people showing up, then I want my pay to be raised. Well, after about 6 months of doing that, I was getting 20 kids easy. And they were coming in from other churches. It wasn't just this church. I was really, I know how to run a group. I guess that was a presage what I'm doing today, I guess you could say. And I was doing all sorts of good stuff. But I was also going to university, Friends University, here in Wichita. It's a little Quaker college that's been around since the 1890s. And a good college, got a good education there. But I met a man there who was a black minister. And his church was an independent Christian church, but it was black. Wow, I never knew there were black churches in our denomination. That just blew my mind. And I really questioned him to really make sure. And he's, yes, we are the same denomination. You are independent Christian and I'm independent Christian. And you're an all black church and I'm an all white church. No black kid had ever darkened the door of my home church. I'm guaranteeing you that. So I get this bright idea that, well, why don't we get our youth groups together? And so I do. We make a deal. He had a church bus. He brings the kids over and Sunday night. Now, here's what was going on. For 6 months, I'd been running that church, that youth group, every Sunday night, youth group. 6 months I've been doing it. I would beg and plead and everything I could to get parents to come help me. And you know what it's like? I'm a 20-year-old trying to corral a bunch of 13, 14, 15 horny kids, right? And they'll go behind the building, and do things. And I can't control them.
Your kids are out of control. Too many hormones in one building.
Yeah, and not enough adults to supervise.
We need more oversight.
20 hormonal kids, and I'm just barely keeping it together. But I have good programs, and we do fine. Well, So I never can, I might get a parent to show up once in a while, but a lot of times I was the only one there. Well, the day those black kids came, I had about 10 parents show up.
Oh, wow.
And they got, all the white kids were there. And as soon as that bus drove up, they herded all the white kids into the building. It was a little, almost like a barn, I guess you could say, that we used for the youth group. And they herded them all over to the right side where they had two rows of chairs, right and left side, standard setup. Put all the white kids on one side. And then as the black kids came in, it says, "These are our guests. You're welcome to sit here." And they made all the black kids sit on the other side. In other words, totally segregated.
Yeah.
So still,
I was livid. I could not believe. Jesus loves all the children, red and yellow, black and white. They're precious in his sight. That's what my grandmother, who's as racist as could be, had taught me. And I believed it. Stupid me. I didn't realize it.
You're
Could be
so
a
naive.
racist. This was like 1970.
Yeah.
So it was pretty interesting. So they segregated, and then when the lesson was over and we'd had the program finished, we started to get up and leave, and the parents said, "Oh no, all the white kids stay seated. The black kids, you're our guests. You could come over here and have the cookies and Kool-Aid. And oh, by the way, get right on your bus when you're finished."
oh no.
So they didn't mix at all.
Oh, well, they wouldn't let them say a word to each other.
Wow.
Not at all. It was horrible.
Oh.
So that is lesson number one in Christian hypocrisy.
Yes.
I have a number of stories that I'll be happy to tell. So they go home. A couple weeks later, I have an appointment with the board of directors to ask for my raise, because I've exceeded all expectations. They've never seen, and they've told me this. I've had people come up to me and say, "We've never had this good of attendance in the youth group." And we're in Sunday school, which I was also teaching Sunday school there. And so I go before the board, and they don't say a word about this. They just say, "We can't afford it. We're not going to give you a raise." They don't fire me. They just say, "We can't afford it." So I keep a $5 salary. I said, "Well, okay." And I put in my resignation, gave them about a month's notice, and I left. Went back to my home church. And there I decided I have some ideas. I was kind of a rabble rouser. We had this gymnasium, a beautiful, beautiful gymnasium. And our church is pretty new. And I thought, that gymnasium sits idle about 360 days out of the year. Nobody uses it unless there's a wedding or something like that. So what I would like to do, a friend of mine had done this at his church, said, I would like to open it up to all the neighborhood kids as an after-school program. And I'll run the after-school program. You have to pay me a minimum wage, and I'll open it up, and I'll clean it up and all that. I went before the board. Remember, my dad's the chairman of the board, so I had a little advantage, and they approved of it. What they didn't approve of was letting black kids come in.
Oh no.
There were brown kids and there were black kids in that neighborhood. I don't think they thought about that before they approved it. Anyway, I did that for a while and got it going, had some helpers, and it went pretty well. But at the same time, I decided to start a bus ministry. I'd read this book about bus ministries, and that is you take the church bus and you go out and knock on doors and tell people, Do you know about that, Sally-Ann?
Yes, I've heard about it. Yeah.
I read a whole book on bus ministries, and then I came to the board of directors and said, "Hey, I want to do a bus ministry."
Yeah.
And they approved it. They didn't pay me anything, but they did approve it. So I got the bus, and I could, they gave me enough money for gas for the bus. So I started going out and knocking on people's doors in the regular neighborhood, especially the housing, the low-income housing areas. Again, I don't think they thought this through when they approved it.
This Darrel, he's reaching out to everyone with Christian love. You're not supposed to do that.
You have to be selective, though, in the kids that you pick up.
It's only the people Jesus wants to love, Darrel.
Well, if you knock on a door of somebody who's, struggling, and they've got 2 or 3 kids, and and you say, hey, I would like to babysit your kids for 3 hours on a Sunday morning, that takes them about 3 nanoseconds to say, yes, I'll have our kids ready. I had that bus full within 2 weeks. I mean, we were bringing 40 kids. We had a full bus, 40 kids coming in, and about half of them were brown and black. And the old white-haired ladies just could not fathom that black kids were running in this church. And they would come to me and complain about shit their own grandkids were doing every day, of course, but in that same church. But their grandkids are white, not the black ones. I did that for about 6 months, and I got a guy to help me. He was a lawyer, a couple years older than me. He agreed to help me, so he would like drive the bus on the days that I couldn't, or we'd trade off or whatever. And but then I had to leave to go to graduate school. I had decided to go. I wanted to be a minister, but I didn't want to be a traditional minister. I didn't want to be up in the pulpit preaching necessarily. I wanted to be a social justice minister. And I looked all around the country, and I only found two schools, graduate schools, master's level, that had a social justice program at all. And I chose Scarrett College for Christian Workers in Nashville, Tennessee. So I had to go off to graduate school. I left it in his hands. About a week after I got down there, maybe a month after I got down there, I called back in and said, how's the bus ministry going? And what I found out was the board had planted him, had told him to follow me around. And the minute I let go of it, to shut the whole program down. We don't want those black kids in the church.
No, that's terrible.
Yep. But he didn't tell me, and he was a plant. He was a spy. He was deceiving me, intentionally deceiving me.
Yeah.
Which, oh man. And I loved him and his wife. They were great people, Anyway, not as great as I guess I thought they were.
No.
Well,
the reason I tell you these stories.
I was just going to say, Darrel, you were a real mover and shaker. That's the picture I'm getting. Very entrepreneurial in your 20s, piloting all of these initiatives.
I was, but it was surrounded by the Vietnam War, and surrounded by the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
So I had been out protesting against Richard Nixon. I'd been out protesting for civil rights. I was just old enough to get in on the tail end of the civil rights movement. Dr. King had been assassinated in 1968. I remember it well. I remember Bobby Kennedy assassinated. I remember John Kennedy in 1963 being assassinated. All those things were monumental to me. And I think they helped form who I was, because I saw the injustice and I wanted to do something. I guess it just built in. I don't even have to work at it. It just happens. I went out to the No Kings protest a few weeks ago, and it just felt normal. Felt like 1968 again.
Yeah. So it's who you are.
Pardon?
It's who you are. As you said, you were saying,
well, it seems
it's built into you. You don't have to decide to take action, to stand up for the rights of other people. It just comes naturally to you.
I don't know how I got that. It must be in my genes, because my parents weren't like that. None of my brothers were like that. My grandparents were certainly not like that. However, and this comes, I mentioned the Vietnam War. My mother's brother, Uncle Keith, he was my uncle, was in the 1920s and 30s. My mother and her family were in a small town, Argonia, Kansas, which is southwest of where I was born, about 50 miles. And they went to, they were not Quakers, but they went to a Quaker church there because the other churches didn't fit what they wanted, I guess. So they were independent Christian church people, but there was no independent Christian church. So they ended up in the Quaker church. And I'm talking about my grandparents on my mother's side. Okay. Well, in doing that, they now exposed my uncle to the Quaker philosophy, and he ends up becoming a Quaker in the 1930s. Well, pacifism is a big piece of being a Quaker. So, and World War II comes along. He decides he's going to be a pacifist. He will not join the army, but as a result, he's forced to go into the fire service. And he shipped out to California. and his wife follows him. My aunt follows him a little bit later, and he spends the entire war fighting forest fires in California. You don't just serve 2 years or 3 years; you serve the whole of the war if you're a conscientious objector. Mm. So I grew up knowing my uncle had been a conscientious objector. Now I'm a big history fan, and I'm not a fan of Hitler, and I don't believe that, there weren't. I don't know what went through my uncle's head, but it was he took his pacifism very seriously, and I admired that in him. And my parents were ashamed of it. My parents were absolutely ashamed that my uncle had been a conscientious objector. But I'm listening. I'm learning. Then in 1968, I have to register for the draft in the United States for the military, and it's a major decision because I look at the Vietnam War. I think we have no business being there. It's the wrong war for anybody. It's not World War II. This is wrong, morally wrong. So I choose to be a conscientious objector, which meant I had to write an essay out. I had to justify it, use Bible verses, all this stuff. Then I had to go before the draft board and justify why I should not be drafted. And I got a conscientious objector status. But then so that's where I started my 18. I didn't get drafted yet. I wouldn't have been drafted either because I was in college. At that point in time, you got a deferment for college. But the minute you graduate, you're off to Vietnam. The war is winding down by the time I'm a senior, and I'm married, and I'm going to go to into a ministry, and the ministry I was going to qualified. So I got a ministerial deferment from the day I left Friends until the day I went into the seminary, and then the war ended. So it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But that again, I look back and think, 18-year-old kid making that kind of decision. And then I look back at my uncle. He did the same thing. He's 18 years old when he had to make that decision. It was a tough decision. Yeah. Because I told my parents I'll go to prison, I'll go to Canada, I'll be a conscientious objector, whatever I can do. That's what I'm going to do because I'm not going to shoot a gun against somebody I'm in that war. I'm just not going to.
Yeah. Well, so you made that decision, just to clarify, you made that decision at 18 yourself? Yeah.
I had to. Yeah. You have to register. When you turn 18, you have to register for the draft. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's a really courageous step to make at a young age. I mean, 18, it's a huge step to take, particularly when the amount of disapproval around that would have been huge.
Yeah, it was very, very huge. My dad was extremely disappointed, angry, even. And one night he confronted me about it. My dad, we did get spanked when I was a kid, but he wasn't abusive. We usually deserved it when we got spanked. But that particular night, I was 18. He grabs me by the collar, and I could tell he's about ready to hit me. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but he got control over himself. And then he said, "Let's pray about this." So I'd rather pray than get hit. Okay.
Yeah.
You're good with that. Yeah. Wow. No.
We both kneeled down and we prayed, and he prayed for me to see the light and not become a gun.
Yeah.
But at the end, I said, "Well, Dad, I'm sorry, but that's the way I'm going to go." And he did not accept it right then. But I'm telling you, this was mind-boggling. In 1992, we're on a ski trip with my dad and my kids, and we're just sitting around the table. We're all tired from skiing. We're just chatting, having coffee and some supper. And my dad and I get to talking, and he said, "Darrel, you were right about the Vietnam War, and I was wrong."
Wow.
Oh man, that was an enormous. I know how much that took out of him to be able to say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
He had been in the United States Air Force. He was in the United States Army, and then it transitioned to the Air Force while he was in it. So he was kind of proud of the fact that he was one of the first members of the United States Air Force.
Sure. Yeah.
But I tell those stories because I look back on my life and I think those were formative years. And the decisions I made or didn't make, the actions I did or didn't take at that time seemed to have reverberated like an echo throughout my life.
Yes. Yes.
And anyway.
Yes. Wow. Wow. Incredible. So we're at your. So we've jumped around a bit, but let's say we're at your early 20s. You've mentioned that you got married, and you were studying. I never quite got to ask. Were you studying psychology at university?
Oh, I went to seminary. 2 years. I got a master's degree at Scarrett College. And it was religion, but it was social justice. It was a Methodist seminary, if you will, sponsored by the Methodist women. It had a different angle. It was more missionary, but missionary training for actually doing some good, like digging wells or curing diseases.
Right.
It wasn't just preaching.
Right.
That's why I liked that particular one. Of the two I found, the other one was much more evangelical. This one was much more service. Let's help people rather than just preach at them. So that's why I went there. But that was, again, another seminal piece of my life, because as a part of going through this 2 years master's degree at Scarrett, I had the opportunity to walk across the street and take psychology courses at George Peabody College, which is a nationally ranked and recognized to this day psychology college, and walk across the street a different direction and take courses at Vanderbilt Divinity School. So I took systematic theology, Paul Tillich, a book that thick. I think the thing's 600 or 800 pages long. I took systematic theology. I took theology and literature. I took a number of theological courses over at one of the best divinity schools in the entire nation. I mean, it's right up there with Princeton and Harvard divinity schools. So I'm getting really, really good theological education, even as I'm learning about social justice.
Yes.
And my main advisor was a guy named Bill Barnes. And Bill, I walked on the campus. They told me, as your advisor, Bill Barnes, because of your major. So I went and met Bill Barnes and instantly fell in love with the guy. Everybody fell in love with Bill Barnes, but he was a rabble rouser that goes way back. I mean, he was probably in his 40s at that particular time, but who he didn't know wasn't worth knowing in the civil rights movement. Oh, right. He knew Dr. King personally, right? I mean, that's how connected he was, among many, many other people. Jesse Jackson. Oh, yeah, Jesse and I have had several good conversations. Yeah, that's the kind of. And he wasn't bragging. That was just who he was.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I have service stuff under him. And so Bill and I started playing twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, go play handball. And this is the old kind of handball that you use your hands. You have a glove and you hit the ball with your hands. Nobody plays that anymore. But he was damn good. And I was pretty good because I'd taken that in college as one of my electives. And we would play every Tuesday and Thursday, which gave me the opportunity to really know who Bill was.
Yeah.
He beat me every single game. I never scored more than 5 points on him.
He didn't go easy on you, did he?
He was he's probably let me get those 5. I don't know. But over a course of 2 years, and you're playing handball twice a week, you get to know somebody and get to know flavor of them. I also had to do some work under him. So we went off to the senior citizens high rise, which was ostensibly not segregated, but it really was. There was only black people. Remember, this has been 1973. And segregation was only, still practiced, whether they liked it or not.
Yeah.
But it was a high rise for senior citizens. And we'd go over there and we would sit down with the people and we would help them fill out their Social Security paperwork or solve problems around getting their disability or that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we'd bring everybody together and I'd play the harmonica and Bill would play the guitar. He was a pretty good guitarist. And we'd just sing old gospel music for these people. Most of them were in their 70s or 80s and they loved us. They just fucking loved having us come. They couldn't wait for us just because, I don't know, two white guys sitting there playing music.
Good entertainment.
Yeah, they'd play.
Oh, wow.
I got a real understanding what poverty was, what being elderly was in a segregated system. In 1973, when I'm in Nashville, I've never been to Nashville, never hardly been out of, I mean, I've been out of my home state, but I hadn't traveled a lot. There were still signs in Nashville that said colored only and whites only on the restrooms and on the water fountains. So
Water fountain.
they did,
That's the classic.
they couldn't enforce it, but they didn't take the signs down.
Oh, gosh.
So there were water fountains for Black people and there were water fountains for white people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to imagine for someone my age what that would be like.
Yeah, it was still quite a segregated.
So much better now.
We hope you're enjoying Recovering from Religion Stories Australia. We'll be right back after a word from the founder of RFR Australia, sharing who we are, what we do, the resources we offer, and how you can be part of it.
Hi, I'm Sherry D'Souza, International Board Member and founder of the Australian New Zealand Recovering from Religion, and I want to take a moment to tell you about the vital work that we do. Recovering from Religion Australia is dedicated to supporting individuals who are transitioning away from religious belief. We understand that this journey can be both empowering and challenging, and we're here to provide compassionate support and resources every step of the way. We offer a range of resources to assist you. Our website is a valuable hub where you can find information and access to our services. For immediate assistance, we have a confidential web chat feature and a dedicated phone line. Details of that are in the description below. In addition to these resources, we offer both in-person and virtual support groups where you can connect with others who understand your experiences. What I'm particularly proud of is our women's support group, which provides a safe and supportive space specifically for women navigating this transition. To join any of our support groups, including the women's group, please visit our website or contact us via the web chat or phone. Our mission is to ensure that no one has to go through this journey alone. We're committed to providing the guidance and community support that you need to heal and thrive. Thank you for listening and supporting our mission. Together we can build a network of support and create a space where everyone can find their path to freedom and fulfillment.
And now, back to Recovering from Religion Stories Australia.
So, to resume, we are in your early 20s and you're walking us through it sounds to me like you got a great amount of exposure to a lot of great people. Like you rubbed shoulders with a lot of very intelligent, very knowledgeable, also very compassionate people who were interested in social justice.
Yeah. One of the things we did the very first semester, we had a mid-semester on January. We, with Bill Barnes as the leader, we all jumped in our cars, about 20 of us, and we did a tour of civil rights leaders in the South. And this is in January. It's cold. It's snowing. It's not good weather, but we're staying in the basements of various churches, almost all Black churches, and we're getting to hear people who are in their 80s tell us about what it was like to be a civil rights or union leader in the 1930s. And it was just, I can't tell you how impactful that was to hear somebody say, and with the potential of being lynched, hung by a mob, go out and assert your civil rights in the 1930s in Georgia or in Virginia or in South Carolina and Charleston. So we got to meet about a dozen of these really elderly leaders that Bill knew them all, including one was the retired minister of the Austin Methodist Church that Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president of the United States, went to. And he had been fired when he got up in the pulpit. When Johnson was in his pew, he got up in the pulpit and condemned the Vietnam War. And as a result of that, he got fired. So we got to we all sat in the room with him sitting in a chair and listened to his stories. So and then we got to go visit Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, where Martin Luther King and his father had been ministered. Yeah, that was 2 weeks of my life that were burned into my brain, getting to meet all these people and hear how their lives had been. Anyway,
that must have had a huge impact.
So I'm in Scarlett College. I'm taking some really interesting courses. I'm learning a lot about theology as well as social justice. And when I'm finished with the theological stuff, I realize theology, systematic theology, or any of that stuff, is just mental masturbation. It makes you feel really good, but you don't really accomplish anything.
I was going to ask you, Darrel, I was going to ask, after all this time studying theology, like, what did you come out thinking about it? Because for me, it's like you're mentioning this very thick textbook, and firstly, I couldn't imagine a bigger waste of time, you know. Just like, for me, the analogy that I've come to use about theology is like debating the specifics of the colors of the blood vessels in the wings of the fairies. You know, it's like, it's that level, isn't it? Is it? Or would you agree with that take after studying it so long?
Pretty close, yep.
Yeah.
Pretty close. Well, I'm glad I did it. I really am, because it helped me understand what, quote, we're up against, so to speak. And, you know, you can't pull the wool over my eyes. I've studied it all. I know the Bible pretty damn well. I know the theology going clear back to pre-Christian era. I've always been interested in the history of the Christian church, going clear back to the Ante-Nicene Fathers. When I first saw this thing in the library, this bookshelf in Friends University, when I was undergraduate, I took a course on the Synoptic Gospels. I'm an undergraduate then. And I go to the library and I see something called the Ante-Nicene Fathers, and it's a whole bookshelf. And who are these folks? When I turn out, well, they're the church fathers before the Council of Nicaea. I thought, wow, I never heard of any of these people, because they sure didn't talk about it in my church. You know, they didn't talk about when was the Bible put together.
Yeah.
They talked. My grandmother taught me that Jesus wrote the King James Version of the Bible. And she was serious. She was dead serious about that.
It's so funny because it's wrong on so many levels.
Isn't it just?
Even the book has like these epistles that are written by other
people that we don't even know who actually wrote them.
Yeah, I love it.
That's fascinating.
Multiple layers of wrong, all on top of each other,
and just taken as gospel.
One of the things I was able to do at Scarrett College was two of my professors. This is crazy. I don't know how this worked, but two of my professors had their PhDs in anthropology, and they had gone overseas, I guess, as Christian missionaries, but they also were anthropologists. And they come back and now they're teaching. Well, I got to sit under these two really good professors, one of whom was a student of Franz Boas many, many years before. He was quite elderly at the time. You probably don't know who Franz Boas is, but he's like the father of American anthropology. So I got to study under some pretty big names there, or people that had studied under big names. And it exposed me to a concept called a civil religion. I'd never heard of such a thing. And so I wrote a paper on the civil religion for one of my anthropology classes. And, many, many years later, that one article, that one paper I wrote, I lost it. I couldn't find it. It turned out I'd loaned it to a friend, and the friend was moving. He was going through his stuff, and he found my paper. He sent it back to me. I said, I want it back. And he sent it back to me. And that became the essence of the God virus. So that chapter on the civil religion, chapter 3 of the God virus, started as a term paper in my graduate work at Scarrett College.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
I mean, I wasn't thinking that at the time. It's just, wow, it all came together.
But were you still believing at that stage, or sort of believing?
I kept getting more and more and more liberal, but I still thought, there probably was a Jesus person, and he had this social justice, and there was probably a guy. God, I didn't believe in prayer really, because I tried it and never worked, so kind of gave up on that. And here's the thing: when I got to Scarrett College, I had a guy. This happened to me a couple of times. Say, "Hey, you want to come over to my dorm and study with me? We're taking the same course." So I went over to his dorm, and He didn't seem too interested in studying, and then he took his shirt off, and then he started making suggestions, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on here? I'm married, and he's coming on to me. And what I soon learned was probably 40% of all the students were gay at Scarrett College for Christian workers, because they had the best choir program. They had the best Christian education program, and that seemed to attract that group from within the Methodist Church. I was quite homophobic at the time. I'd been raised to be homophobic. That was there was clear signals around that when I was growing up. So to be confronted with somebody who's coming on to me, just, there's some wires start getting crossed in my brain. So I had to come to terms with my own homophobia in many ways, because here's people I'm studying with every day. Men, and there were probably trans people there, but I didn't know it. I mean, back then they had to hide, or they'd been kicked out of school probably. So there was a lot of going on. Plus I'm married, and I'm in the first 2 or 3 years of my marriage. I'm trying to figure out what that means. And anyway, there was a lot going on, as there is in many people.
A lot. Yeah.
I'm not.
So you're being confronted really with worldviews and people who lived differently and believed differently from yourself, but you were also very much of this mind that this is the way things are from a religious perspective. This sort of, Jesus, God, being a Christian, that's the truth. And at the same time, it sounds like slowly, some of that was starting to get challenged, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah, by the time I was finished with that master's degree, I graduated in 1974. I would call myself a super liberal Christian.
Right.
Borderline agnostic. I wouldn't have said it at the time, but practical purposes,
so if you're around your mid-20s already,
I'm 24 at the time.
Yeah.
I have a good contact through a church that we were attending. It was a very, very liberal Presbyterian church at the time. It was a fellow student. He and I had gone to several classes together, and Jack Seymour. And Jack and I just became really, really good friends. He ended up being the dean of Garrett Theological Seminary in Chicago. I mean, that's again a friendship that had real impact on me. And we stayed friends for probably 25 years, and pretty much the God virus what killed our friendship. I lost 2 very important friendships over the God virus, but that's way on down the line.
Yeah.
But these early friendships, the other one I started in my freshman year of college. The second one I started my first year of graduate school. And these 2 friendships lasted for decades. But both of them, the first one, David, he became a chaplain. And then Jack became a dean of a theological seminary. So I'm making friends with very religious people, obviously.
Yeah.
But again, those are good things because I'm learning from them. We're interacting, we're asking hard questions, and we have a pretty open ability to talk and communicate. And I really enjoyed their...
liberal as you, Darrel, or did you have any conflicts over points?
No, if anything, I was following them. Both of them were more liberal than I was, even because David was a Quaker pastor. And Quakers, remember, I eventually became what a Quaker about the time I finished graduate school. My wife and I weren't happy with any of the places we looked at for church. They were never liberal enough for us. So we ended up going to the Quaker meeting in Nashville for the last year or 2 years, I guess, that we were there. So, and I actually joined the Quaker meeting there.
Okay.
And I've never unjoined it, so I guess I'm a Quaker atheist. At least I tell people I'm a Quaker atheist.
So that was, you said, around age 24, 25?
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, but I didn't join. I went to church for a couple of years, but I didn't join it until I'd actually left. I moved back to Kansas, where I live now, before I joined the church. Anyway, you can be an atheist and be a Quaker. So I'm a Quaker atheist, if you will.
Right.
I've always been, Quakers have been social justice since the day they were started. when George Fox back in 1648 or so started the Quaker movement. They were dealing with prison reform and mental health reform almost since the day they started. So it fit really well with what I did.
I don't know much about the Quakers. Are they still considered Christian? Is that really a strong theme within it, or is it more focused on the social justice?
It depends on which Quaker. If you're an East Coast Quaker, it's very liberal and very social justice. If you're a West Coast Quaker, as in California, it's more like a Baptist. A lot of people don't know, but even within the same church, you can have vast changes and differences.
Yeah.
As the Quaker Church, there's a book called People Called Quakers by D. Elton Trueblood. Great, interesting book if you're interested in seeing how religion evolved as people moved west across the continent. Yeah. And the reason I mention that is because, again, that book influenced my writing of the God virus. Now, so it's a book about a religion, but what the book does is illustrates how Quakerism started in Philadelphia and how it ended in California with Richard Nixon types. I mean, Richard Nixon was a Quaker, but he was a war Quaker. He was a horrible person, but he was a Quaker. So he wouldn't have lasted in Philadelphia. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've become...
Shows how church, just like organisms evolve per the God virus. We'll talk about that later anyway.
Yes, sure. So you've become affiliated or sort of joined the Quakers. What happens next? And so at this point you were already sort of agnostic. Sounds like you'd stopped praying. Sounds like you'd become extremely liberal around a lot of points. Would you say so? I mean, at what age did you cease to believe in God or become agnostic?
Well, that's quite a ways in the future. We'll not go there yet.
So back then you were still believing.
I was still a believer. Yeah, I still believer. I'm pretty namby-pamby liberal believer. But if you'd have said, Darrell, you're an atheist, I'd have said, hell no. If you'd have said, are you an agnostic? Well, I'm a Christian agnostic, if I'm an agnostic at all, but I'm still a Christian.
Right.
And in fact, one of my closest friends, who I just came back last week from visiting down in Sarasota, Florida, he was the one that confronted me with that. He was an atheist, had been a lifelong atheist, and when about 1988, he confronted me with, "What do you really believe, Darrell?" And I had to move a few notches, I guess. It was I was very stubborn. I was not going to let go of my religion.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Great.
And it was like literally a 20-year process. I'll tell you that a little bit later. But anyway, so I'm going through. I graduated with my master's degree in church and community. That was the title of church and community at Scarrett College for Christian Workers. But while I was there, I also took some psychology courses, social psych up in Peabody. So I got exposed there, got exposed to theology, got exposed to social justice, all in the course of just 2 years. And among some other really interesting things, I thought, but we won't go there now. I graduate and I'm unemployed for 3 months. I can't find a job, or I'm looking hard, but I can't. And my training, religion isn't exactly a qualification for a lot of things. But I did have a good contact, and he had a friend. And so I ended up getting a job as a counselor at a youth rehabilitation center called Spencer Youth Center. It's no longer in existence in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm hired on as a counselor. Well, the reason I got hired on was I showed up for the interview for the supervisor that was hiring me, and he didn't seem interested in my psychological training at all, because I had none. Basically, I had 2 or 3 courses at Peabody. He was more interested in what my faith was. Turns out he was a fundamentalist Church of Christ. I mean, pretty conservative. I didn't know that, but I'd been warned by my contact that that's what he would do. So I answered all the questions right. And he saw I had a master's degree in religion, so that seemed to qualify me. I got the job. I didn't deserve the job, and I wasn't qualified for the job, but I got it anyway.
You got in.
But as a result of that, I I was in that job for about 8 months, and I made a good friend at another unit who was the director of that other unit. And ultimately, I was able to transfer from my unit to his because they were doing some really interesting new psychological training called rational emotive therapy with Dr. Albert Ellis. I'd never heard of any of these people or this guy or any of this training. So I was able to transfer over, and for the next 2 years, I became the senior therapist in this unit, and I was able to take courses. The state paid for me to go train. I'd fly up to Cincinnati or other places and take entire courses, entire weeks of training directly from Albert Ellis, the father of cognitive behavioral therapy. And I like to brag about that. It's really cool.
That's definitely
Yes,
worth bragging about.
Darrel.
Yeah, I'd be bragging about that one too.
Yeah. But that was earth-shaking to, Ellis was a raving atheist. He was even named Atheist of the Year by the American Atheist Association in the late 70s, I believe it was. I don't remember. So here I am taking all this training from a raving atheist.
Oh, very cool.
I kept having to deal with this cognitive dissonance about, rational thinking, and here's this irrational idea about religion or Jesus or whatever. So I was after about 8 months of being employed there, I thought I need to learn what I'm doing. So I applied to get back into graduate school and got into a doctoral program at George Peabody College, which is now since merged with Vanderbilt. So it's now known as George Peabody College of Vanderbilt University. In fact, that's what's on my diploma, because they merged the time I graduate's when they merged. So I got that on my diploma. But I took a lot of courses at Vanderbilt, most of my studies, of course, at Peabody. And at Peabody, I got to study with, again, some pretty high-powered people like Jules Seaman, who was one of the 4 top students under Carl Rogers. So, I'm getting direct training from that quality of a person. Yeah. And I'm just really enjoying the challenge of learning at work, learning about rational emotive therapy and Albert Ellis, and then coming to school and learning about Carl Rogers and person-centered therapy and that sort of stuff.
Ooh. Amazing.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Very productive time. But after 2 years of that, I learned that I wanted to train. I wanted to do some training. And I learned that training of our employees and training of some volunteers. And I learned that I liked training, and I was pretty good at it. So a fellow named Doug Morgan, who was creating this new institute called Tennessee Corrections Institute, came by, and he heard I was going to be doing some training, and he said, well, we're going to be doing that kind of training, so I don't want you doing it. I don't want you doing that training because we're going to do it. So I said, well, okay, that's fine. When are you going to start it? He said, well, I don't know, because we're just starting this institute. I said, well, I didn't say it this way, but basically I said, well, go fuck yourself. I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay.
So I started doing my training, and a few months later, I get this phone call from Doug saying, hey, how would you like to come work for me and be the trainer? Be the supervisor of training.
Yep. If you can't beat him,
so I went from being a therapist to being a trainer, and my job was to literally create trainers, train trainers, and send them across the entire state and train 3,000 probation parole officers and prison guards. Our job was to train all the corrections related people in the whole state of Tennessee and get it done within a year or two. Wow. It was a totally unreasonable goal since we've done this before. But anyway, so I'm in this position of I'm 27, 28 years old, and I'm responsible for the entire state and getting all this training done. Pretty big responsibility.
I'd say so. Yeah. Wow. How'd that go?
And I've just had my wife had her first child in 1975. So I've got a 2 or 3 year old, and my wife's a full-time teacher, and I work from noon to 8 o'clock. So I get up, I take care of the baby. I do all the night feedings. I'm really good at going back to sleep. So she dumped that on me for sure. And I really enjoyed being a father because I got 3 or 4 hours every morning with my daughter. And it was just a wonderful, my daughter and I are really still close, really close. I really enjoy her. She's a sweetie. And she's a clinical pharmacist. She's got her doctorate in pharmacology, clinical pharmacist in a major hospital. She does all sorts of interesting work around stuff. Anyway, get off track there. So so many things happen, and there's a 3-year time period, which I literally could tell you, it'd take me an hour, which I won't do, an hour to tell you all that happened here. But that piece, I look back and I think, I could not do that today. I don't have the energy. But I was also finishing my doctoral dissertation that was very intensely research based. Anyway, you can look it up. It's on the line. So I've got my doctorate's finished. I got a pretty new baby. I got a full-time job. I'm learning Albert Ellis. I'm going to school for, all the other therapy stuff that I'm trying to get. It's like having 5 full-time jobs, and I was only getting one of them.
Yes.
But it was really, really productive and good time in my life. I won't tell you all. I mean, literally, I could tell you a lot more there. That's a lot happened in those 3 years that aren't related to religion. So we're going to move over that. Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah,
So it just so we have the time frame. These 3 years are your mid to late 20s, is it?
27, 28, and part of 29. And then I move. My wife and I move. We want to get back closer to the grandparents because we've had a child. And my second child is on the way. Not born yet, but on the way. And, so I moved back to Kansas, to Atchison, Kansas, at the Atchison Youth Center at Atchison. Again, another adolescent boys, child psychology, that sort of stuff. I was doing that pretty well in Tennessee, and then I came here to do it here. Got into a really, and then the grandparents, both my and her parents, lived in Wichita, so we were within a 3-hour drive of them, but they couldn't come visit us too easily. We like being close, but not too close. And that worked out pretty well for us. But the interesting thing was I got into a really bad situation when I took this job. I was basically the chief clinical psychologist in the institution, and the chief social worker was a psychopath. I mean, she was something else. Anyway, there was a lot of legal stuff came around this, and it ended up, I hadn't even been there 6 months, and she's doing illegal placement of children. She's taking boys out of our institution and placing them into a group home, a foster home that was not licensed, which is absolutely illegal. I don't know how she was getting away with this. The superintendent of the institution was uninterested in doing anything about it. She'd been there for 25 years, and her husband was a state representative in the state legislature. So she was pretty powerful, as was he. So it came to and I tell you this because it has something to do with social justice. It came to a head. I said, I cannot do this anymore. This woman is not, I did not realize all the illegal stuff she was doing. I saw a little bit of it. I also knew that she was insufferable to work with. Everybody hated her. Even her own subordinates, the other social workers, they hated her too. And I was getting all sorts of stories about inappropriate stuff that she was doing with our clientele. So I go to my supervisor, the clinical director for the entire institution, and I tell Dr. Terry Kearns was his name, and I say, Terry, this is illegal. This is wrong. We should not be. We need to challenge this. And he basically advised me, do not do that, Darrel. You'll lose your job. You've only been here 6 months. You're not even through probation yet, because I literally could get fired for no reason at all. And by this time, my second child had been born, my son, in May of 1979. And I'm thinking here, what do? I got 2 young children. I got a brand new job. I moved, 800 miles from Nashville to Leavenworth. I live in Leavenworth, Kansas. I sit down and tell my wife what I'm thinking about doing, and she's very supportive. She said, she said, whatever you think's right, I'm behind you. And I really appreciated that, because that would have been a problem, if I tried to do it without her being on board. So, they had a thing called the Talkington Commission. It was a joint commission of the House of Representatives and the Senate of Kansas, investigating several of the institutions, including ours, for malfeasance and illegal stuff and all. It wasn't just our institution. There were others having problems. When it came time for our institution, I put my name in. I wrote up a rather lengthy description of all that was happening, and I get my appointment to go in, and I go in this big legislative room, dark wood and chairs, high chairs all over, and 9 people setting up like they're my judges in a podium. And I get ready to go up there, and the husband of the psychopathic social worker walks in, sits down right across from me in the room, makes a big deal of pulling a tape recorder. Back then we had tape recorders out of his briefcase, setting it down and hitting the record button, clearly trying to intimidate me.
Yeah.
But I go up, I stand in front of the podium, I read my whole. You submit your written testimony, and then you stand up and you read it, and then you take questions or whatever. And I'm just, I don't know if I'm in a job when I walk out of that room or not. I really don't. And as a result of that, I'm walking out, about ready to get to the door, and I hear footsteps rapidly coming up behind me. I'm thinking, oh shit, what's going on? Am I going to get fired right here?
Yeah.
I go out the door. Whoever was behind me just follows me right out. And there's a guy named Keith Colsnow, and he's the legal counsel for the committee. And he stops me and says, look, we saw what he did to you. We know he was trying to intimidate you. Don't worry, you will not get fired over this. And we took your testimony very seriously. And wow, I was totally relieved, because I really didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But I went back to work, and it was months of still having to work with her until we got a new superintendent, and he finally found reason to fire her. And the reason she got fired is another gigantic story that has nothing to do with religion. But I tell you that because sometimes there's really tough choices in life about what you're going to do, and it could have major implications for other people in your life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't take those decisions lightly. When I was single, I did take them more lightly, probably. But when you're married, you got to be a little more careful about that. And, and I tried to be. But fortunately, I had a good spouse that was willing to hang in there with me.
Yeah.
Such a valid point that you make there, Darrell. The implications, aren't they? And just, on the topic of religion, it's the implications that leaving religion has for other people in our lives. I think that's so much of the time that's not talked about either. We talk often about what it's like for the person themselves, but the implications that has for other relationships, job, whatever it is, it's got so many wider implications that in many ways we don't realize ourselves. I think most people don't realize until they actually go through it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Takes courage.
Well, and that, I totally agree. And I think that while I did not have the kind of traumatic exit from religion that many of our clients have, that experience for me is got some parallels to it. I've got some ability to understand what they're going. So I'm in this institution. I'm a psychologist. I'm starting to get asked to go around and train people, and I'm training management. And I basically the short story of that is I learned that I'm very good at management kinds of stuff, very good at leadership stuff, very good at training people. And I turned that into a career in organizational psychology. So I leave clinical psychology. I resign from that institution with 2 vacation days. And after that, it's like, no pay. How am I going to survive? My wife did not like it. She said, nope, don't like this at all because, you have no visible means of support. But I learned fast and I figured out how to market myself and we survived. We did fine, actually did pretty good. Anyway, so not long after that, about a year after I started the new business, I won't go into the details there, but we end up getting divorced. So I'm back to 2 kids and neither one of us are very religious. My ex-wife, whom we're still good friends with, she's a great mother. She's a great grandmother. We're still friends. We see each other, children and grandchildren's events. It's a good relationship. If you're going to have a relationship with your ex, I hope it would be like the one I've got with her. And we do fine on that level. But now her family was very religious. My family was not quite as religious. But when I left the marriage, I was suddenly free. I had none of this religious bullshit. I didn't have to go to Thanksgiving and hear stupid prayers. I didn't have to get blessings or any of that stuff. So it really quickly hit me. I'm an agnostic. At that point in time, I realized I start going to the local Quaker meeting, but I'm not real serious about it. I like the people. They're very socially aware. They're into social justice stuff. But their meeting house is a long drive from where I live, so I didn't go very often. But I continued my interest in the Quaker movement, if you will. And I'd read quite a bit. I'd read all of George Fox's works, and I'd read D. Elton Trueblood's People Called Quakers and other things. So I understood what they stood for. Yeah. And I do this entire career in corporate America now, doing organizational psychology. And I'm using my organizational skills and my training skills. And then I write, in the course of this time period, I write 2 different books on organizational psychology, mainly focused on teams and how to create a team-based work system and self-directed work teams, which is kind of cutting edge for psychology of org psych stuff at that time. It still is cutting edge because it's hard to do. So, we can kind of fast forward through this whole time period because for 30 years, I was doing this profession, org psych, which wasn't really related to religion at all. However, I was interacting with religious people, and a lot of my clients were human resource people. And what I learned is a lot of human resource people are pretty religious. So I had to keep my ideas. And I didn't say anything. I wasn't out there pushing it. I'm in my office right now, and I had 4 staff members, paid staff members that came here to work. So they all worked out of my home, which is a pretty ideal situation. And they helped me train, and I had an office manager, all that kind of stuff. And none of them were particularly religious. In fact, one of them, Shawn, he was very anti-religious. He was an atheist, although I didn't know that at the time. One day, Shawn, I would say Shane. I said Shane, not Shawn. That's Shawn. Shane came one day and said, "Hey, Darrel, I think you'd like to know about this." This is in 2004. He said, Kansas School Board's trying to cram creationism into the educational system here. And there's a guy out of Oregon State University called Bobby Henderson who's been enlightened by the flying spaghetti monster and now is enlightening the Kansas School Board about the creation story of the flying spaghetti monster. So I learned that the FSM has revealed himself to Bobby Henderson, who then reveals the FSM to the creationists of the Kansas School Board. And the legal team there, the school board says, we can't be teaching 2 different creation stories. So you gotta drop them all. Nice. So that's the source of the flying spaghetti monster was the Kansas School Board. Well, because I'm a Kansan and I've been around a long time, I was able to get the title of the high priest of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Nice. Did you know that I am the high priest?
No.
I actually did hear that on a previous podcast that I've listened to, and yeah, that's a pretty cool title
to have, Darrel?
I like to say I'm higher than the fucking Pope.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
With that one.
Kiss my ring the next time you see me.
Oh, nice. I was thinking for the FSM that it would be great if we could have some kind of mantra that we repeat. I was thinking, hallowed are the appendages. How does that work?
Did you just come up with that now?
No, I thought of it before.
Oh, you've been thinking about this.
I thought of it before. I like the sound of it. Hallowed are the appendages. Yeah. Just, at the end of it's sort of like peace be upon him, but
Indeed.
the FSM version.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Can we run with that? Yeah. I mean, you're the high priest here, Darrel. Does that work?
Yeah. Do we have your blessing to use the mantra, Darrel, is what we're asking. Or high priest.
I love it. Yes, let's make that. Hallowed be thy appendages. I love it. Let's adopt that. You have my permission.
Great.
One thing I forgot to say was, in the 80s, before I got divorced, we were still going to this very liberal Presbyterian church in Leavenworth, Kansas. That's where I live now. And they needed substitute preachers every now and then, and they needed an adult Sunday school teacher. So guess who volunteered? So I volunteered to be I'm not even a member of the church, but they couldn't find anybody to teach Sunday school. So I volunteered to teach the adult Sunday school. And I came up with all sorts of really interesting, theology and the history of Christianity. And then I did a comparative religions. Now, they couldn't get 5 people to show up to the adult Sunday school when I took it over. Within a few months, they had to move us out. The room I was in could only hold about 25 or 30 people, and that was standing room only. It was crowded. Within a couple months, we were moving into a bigger room that held 100. And I was bringing 40 and 50 people every Sunday morning to engage with the content that I was providing. They had never heard of this stuff. They didn't know what the history of the Nicene Creed was. They didn't know what a comparative religion, why the Quakers were different than the Baptists. They didn't know any of it. Ignorant. Yeah. And so I'm really enjoying teaching a church that I don't belong to adults that are, you have no idea what all this is. But the most popular one was comparative religions. And I would reach out and find a Hindu or a Sikh or a Muslim, and I was bringing them in to talk to the class on a Sunday morning. It was like mind-blowing to them to hear all this other stuff. I hope I made a few atheists out of them. I'm not sure if I did.
But it shows how interested people are in that content, aren't they? I mean, church can be so drab, can't it? Like we all know, we've all been to church. Some of it is so boring most of the time, isn't it?
And you're hearing the same stuff over and over again, aren't you? It's just, and once you've been to church for a few years, you've heard the same messages a few times at that point.
Yeah. I had people come up to me after they'd been to my, coming to my, I feel like I'm getting a very exciting and interesting college course every time I come to church now.
Yes.
Which
so
nobody else is.
Adult Sunday school classes. This is not a concept I've ever experienced. Having adult Sunday school always referred to children's classes. So this was like almost maybe discipleship type course that would be currently run at churches now, or just an education course.
Usually there's Sundays in Protestant churches, at least around here, you have Sunday school for an hour, and then you have church for an hour. And Sunday school is for both adults and children, but they meet in different places.
Okay.
So you have Sunday school over here, and the children's over here, and the infants and the toddlers over here. Yeah, no, it's a whole hour. Now, you might not come to Sunday school, maybe you just show up for church.
Right.
But we always...
Oh, no, that does not exist in my part of the world or in this part of the world. Sunday school was always something that I think as a child, I remember we'd like leave the service after maybe the worship, and then you'd go to Sunday school while the parents sat in, or the adults sat in and heard the preaching or the message. Okay. It's different.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's not A lot of times the children are right in church, attending church with their parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might have child care. They oftentimes have child care for the younger ones, but not for the older ones. I was forced to sit in church from the time I was about 8 years old on.
Yeah.
There was no place for me to go.
No.
It's so boring, isn't it? When you get so fidgety. There's many fidgety kids whose needs aren't being met.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just give a recap of what we've covered so far. So we have covered a lot of ground. We've covered your 20s. We've covered your education and your religious upbringing. We've covered how you were from the very beginning very interested in social justice. And we've also covered how you gradually, it sounds to me like in your case, your transition out of religion was very gradual. You became increasingly liberal, and then one day, post-divorce, you feel more comfortable to adopt the label of an agnostic, but you're involved in the Quaker movement and you're still interested. Darrel, is there a hard and fast moment where you wake up one morning and you're like, I'm an atheist? Or how does it go for you?
Well, yes and no. I'm through the 90s, I was very successful in my business, and then 9/11 hit, and that really clobbered my business. Probably almost knocked 2 years out of my business. And I also started dating a woman, Judy, and we liked traveling. So we were on our way to England, I believe it was. On the plane, it was a little bit later. I was writing an article and reading a book. I was reading a book and I was writing an article, as I recall, and they were like atheist books. They were like they were secular books, at least. And so she and I started discussing, and I'd known she'd been an atheist since she was 14. And we're talking, and I'm telling her I'm an agnostic and all this sort of stuff. And finally she said, Darrel, you need to shit or get off the pot. You're an atheist and you know it.
That's a colorful way to put it.
Isn't it just?
Well, it's a common term here in the States. Maybe not in Australia, but I knew exactly what she meant at that moment. It would have been like 2002 or 3. At that moment, I really, I'm calling myself agnostic because I don't want to offend anybody. And I was raised that atheists are horrible people, and you don't want to be a friend with atheists. You certainly don't want to be one. And I kind of had that in the back of my mind. So at that moment, when I finally admitted to her and to myself, but I still had to be careful because I had a corporation, I had a business, and I had to interact with religious people. So I didn't openly say anything. I didn't write anything. And then 2008, after I read Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens and Dennett, all the four so-called four horsemen. I'd also read a number of other Bertrand Russell, Why I'm Not a Christian. I'd read that book. And I realized not one of these people is a psychologist. They don't know anything, or they're not revealing anything about psychology. Harris is a neuropsychologist, but he's still not dealing with the psychological issues that, we deal with every day in regard to religion. So I said, I'm going to write the book from a psychological perspective. And I'm pretty good at writing books that lay people can understand using, pretty sophisticated ideas. I've always had a somewhat of a talent. Now, I always need a good editor. Don't get me wrong. Editors save my life. So I start writing this article, and I sent it off to my good friend Dan Dana that I mentioned earlier. He lives down in Sarasota, and I just came back from visiting. We've literally been friends since 1980, really good friends. And he reads the article, and he sends it back and says, Darrel, I've never read anything like this before. Now, keep in mind, this article is the term paper that I had written clear back in seminary in Scarlet College. So I start rewriting that term paper as an article that I might publish in American Atheist magazine or American Humanist or somewhere, And then I write another article. I send it off to Dan. And Dan says, hey, this is good stuff. Never read anything like this. Keep writing. I hadn't thought about keeping writing. I hadn't thought about that. Mm-hmm. So I keep writing. I sent him another chapter or another article. And by the time I got the third article back, I realized I'm writing a book here. I'm not writing an article.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Nice.
Wow.
So the God virus was an accident.
Yeah.
But it was an accident in the sense that I thought I was writing an article from the psychological perspective. And now I realize, no, I'm writing a whole book from the psychological perspective. And if you read Dennis Harris, any of those guys, I think the God virus puts a fifth component to it that nobody else has. And I think that's largely why it was such a successful book. I mean, it still sells today. I got a royalty check yesterday from that book. So, and everybody that I shopped it to said, it's never going to sell. I got that feedback a lot. It's never going to sell, but it did. So I'm happy about that. But I'm in the middle of writing this book, and I announced to my staff, who's in just the room next door here at the time, I don't have that business anymore, of course. I announced to them I'm writing this book, and my office manager, who's kind of quasi-religious, but really not, she turns white. She says, Darrel, we're going to lose all of our customers, our clients. And I said, no, I don't think so. But if we do, I'm willing to take that risk because I have to write this book. I just felt an incredible need to get this book out because I knew nobody else. I was in a unique position to write that book. I don't think anybody else that could have written that book or anything like it. So, so I published the book, and within 6 months, I've lost all but 2 of my clients.
Wow.
Clients that I'd had for 20 years who loved me. Now, if you're a consultant in a consulting business like I was, you rarely get a client for more than a year, let alone 20 years. And you come in, you do your thing, you leave, you don't know what happened. But that wasn't true with me. My system, I came in, I set it up, and I trained, and I helped people, and they just loved it. And a lot of people were religious. So having them just dump me, they wouldn't return my phone calls, wouldn't return my emails. It was like I went blank. They shunned me.
Goodness.
That's devastating.
Wow.
I think they probably had a suspicion I was irreligious, maybe even atheist. But my crime wasn't being an atheist. My crime was saying it out loud.
Yeah.
That's the real crime, was saying it out loud.
Wow.
So I had layoff. I had very loyal employees, been with me for 10 years, and very good employees. I try to practice what I preach. I try to treat employees the way I want to be treated. And so I had no trouble retaining employees. I'll tell you, that's what I mean. But it was really disappointing that people would just dump me like that.
Yeah.
I had 2 clients that did keep me they didn't seem to be bothered by it. In fact, I even went back and visited one about a year ago up in Nebraska while I was on vacation, and they were very happy to see me, and they knew what I'd written and all. So that happened, and then we've kind of looked at my life up to in the beginning of Recovery from Religion. So where do we want to go?
Yeah,
that's my question.
Just reflecting on that. That is huge and devastating to a business of your size, and such a clear case of religious discrimination, which is kind of shocking to me because I wouldn't expect that to happen here in Australia. Would you? Like, for example, for me, my profile is on the Recovering from Religion website, and my name is out there with some of this content. I'd never really be worried that it would affect my professional work or my clientele.
Yeah.
Well, unless all of your clients were, if all of your clients were Mormons, for example.
Yeah.
And then they found out that you were no longer a Mormon, they might take their business elsewhere, mightn't they? Maybe, but yeah, it's shocking to me that it had to come with such a cost. Yeah.
Because as you well know, that's just not necessarily going to be the case in the universe. There's another universe where it has no impact on your business. And I think that's the universe that we live in here in Western Australia, at least for the most part. They're just two separate domains for us, and my clients don't really care about discussing religion or anything to do with my personal religion, because, as I pointed out, that's a form of religious discrimination, to discriminate against you because you speak out against religion or you're an atheist.
Yeah. Well, it happened, and not much I can do about it. The beautiful thing about it was that the sales of the book almost made up for the lost income. So I had to retire 3 years earlier than I anticipated. Yeah. I did not expect to have to retire that early, but fortunately I had the cushion of the book sales. It could have been much worse. That's what I'm saying.
And you had a successful career in the organizational psychology space for many years, right? 20 plus, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, I started in 1986. And then I ended up in 2009. So that was the core of my career. I had some stuff on either side, of course. I still do some minor consulting, but it's not, I don't make my living that way anymore.
But you picked your moment, basically. As you said, you were prepared for the risk.
I was, mentally, but financially, I wasn't.
Yeah. You took a leap of faith, Darrel.
Well, and you know what the leap of faith was? The leap of faith in my own ability and in my own talents. I was pretty sure I could make. I'd made transitions before.
Yeah.
I don't know where it was. I've had this experience in my life going clear back to elementary school. When I was in elementary school, I was kind of like the clown, or people. I could be a clown, I guess you could say, and I didn't like the way people treated me. I didn't like the way people reacted to me. I really wasn't. I didn't think being a clown was really that good a thing, even though I was probably good at it. I don't know, but so when I graduated from 6th grade to go into what we now call middle school, to go into 7th grade, I decided I was going to change myself. I was going to be a different person. And I did. I stopped playing the clown. And I don't know where I got this idea, but I just changed myself. And so from 7th to 9th grade, I had a pretty successful career in, those 3 years, and I became a different person. And then, but there were elements of who I was and what I was that I wanted to change. So I say, well, when I go from middle school to high school, I'm gonna change these things, which I did, and I became another person. So there's transitions to me seem to work. I don't even know where I got the idea, but I made that transition.
You're comfortable with redefining your sense of self, in a sense, right?
Yeah, I like to reinvent. I can reinvent myself when I have to. I don't do it willy-nilly, of course, but
yeah, sure.
Sort of a conscious evolution.
It is, and it's. I've learned it's kind of a rare thing among humans. A lot of us,
right,
just can't do it. It's hard.
It's hard, yeah. So let's recap where we are now. So basically, you have written The God Virus, which was your first piece of work, your first book-length piece of work on religion. And as you pointed out, you wanted to approach it from a psychological standpoint because you perceived that was what was missing from the new atheist movement of the mid-2000s, 2005, 2007-ish.
Right.
You published this book. It does well enough, which is great, that it can allow this career transition for you. At which point did you ever make a decision that your business time, your organizational psychology business time, is now over and you want to do something else? And obviously you have, because we're here at RFR today. So tell us about that transition.
Well, it was about a 3-year transition because I was trying to keep my business alive from back 2009 to 2012. But of course, 2008-9 was the crash, the
GFC,
financial
crisis.
Yeah, I can't remember what we called that crash now. Anyway, it just was too big a weight. It was like being thrown overboard with a concrete tied to your legs. No matter what I did, I couldn't revive the business. It was gone. But at the same time, I'd hired a publicity guy who was absolutely worthless to help me publicize the book, get the word out, get interviews, that sort of stuff. But he did have one good idea. He said, Darrel, you should start a group that you can sell your book to. Maybe you should call it Recovering from Religion. And then when people come to this group, you could sell them your book. I said, well, that's an interesting idea. I think I'll try that. So I put a notice in the meetup on meetup.com that I'm going to do a Recovering from Religion group. And if you've been hurt by religion, come to this meeting. And 11 people show up. I only knew one of those 11 people. And after about 3 hours, they were shutting the room down, and the store manager was saying, get out of here. But in the meantime, I had people crying and hugging each other, people telling their stories like we're doing here right now, revealing all sorts of stuff and saying in this meeting, I have never said this to another human being in my life. And I'm telling you, this deep guilt or this deep shame I had about my sexuality or about whatever, And at the end of this meeting, I'm walking out and thinking, damn, this isn't a gimmick to sell books. In fact, I didn't sell a single book. So it was a total failure in public relations. But what it did show me was this is a serious need. People need this. Strangers showing up. And these were people from probably 25 years old to 70 years old in this meeting, and then did not know each other. They didn't know me. It was a risk they took to get in the car and come there to a complete stranger. That's what hit me that night was this is such a need that these people were willing to take a risk with a total stranger.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of recovering from religion. I started meeting regularly. I grabbed 2 other people here in town that were part of the skeptics and atheist groups to help me, and they started meetings of their own. Before you know it, we had 3 of these meetings going all around the metropolitan area. But it took me another 3 years to get down to incorporating it. It was kind of a slow start, but I had no idea we'd be sitting here. This was not in my life plan here, Shawn. And
that's such a remarkable start to the story, isn't it? So organic.
Yeah.
And speaks to how deep the need is for people. And we see that need every time we run the support group meeting. Like the same experience that you just described happens nearly every month here on the other side of the planet. How exciting is that?
And I think you guys probably do those meetings 10 times better than I did or could. I'm just thrilled with how good all of our group leaders are, our support group leaders. But the need is so strong that even a poorly led group. I'm pretty good at leading group therapy, that sort of stuff. So I'm not saying I'm not skilled, but I like what we're seeing out of our leaders, and that's not exactly the model I was using, or I wasn't doing as good as we are right now. I don't think
we've had time to evolve, and we also received some good training. Darrel, like it's been codified by now. So that is incredible. So I mean, I don't know if you have any topics you'd like to touch on, Sally-Ann, but from my side, I'd like to spend the rest of the interview talking about 3 bodies of work or 3 topics. The one is the God virus, the second is sex and God, and the third is the topic that you mentioned you wanted to discuss in this interview is how religion passes on trauma. Does that work?
Right.
Yeah.
So let's start with the God virus, because that was your first book. Let's do the long overdue book promotion now, Darrel. Like, tell us.
Sell us the book,
Tell
Darrel.
us the book. We want to hear about it. For anyone who's listening who hasn't read the book, you can give an elevator pitch, but then you can give a longer version too. To walk us through it.
Well, I am a student of history, and I always have been. I'm also a student of anthropology. I'm a student of psychology. I'm a student of sociology. And I really am. I'm not a fly by night. I've taken deep dives in all 4 of those areas. And when I went to write The God Virus, I was taking my cue from those different disciplines centered around what Dawkins did with the selfish gene when he came up with the notion of memes as a unit of culture that gets propagated through brains. And I thought, well, that sounds and he didn't really address the religion thing directly. He kind of indirectly did. But I thought, well, damn, there's an opportunity there. I'm going to take what Dawkins said here and just expand it. Then I'm going to bring in history and sociology, psychology, and anthropology. And so you read the book. There's a lot of all those in there. But because I don't think you really understand how the human brain and the human culture responds to religion until you really look at how religions have functioned throughout history. And there's lots and lots of examples that I pull in to the book. Just a quick example is, why did Islam spread so fast? Well, it spread like a disease. How did Christianity spread so fast? And oh, by the way, Christianity did not spread nearly as fast as Islam did. And they exploded, much like an epidemic explodes. And using the notion of contagion and disease and virus, and of course, all these things kind of came together in helping people understand really simple things like, why do I feel so inspired when I'm singing a song in church with 500 other people? And I have a whole chapter just on what's going on in your brain at that moment. And I don't understand why I no longer believe in God, but I still have this fear of hell. There's all these things that we now deal with that I said, I need to explain this to people, because you can read The God Delusion, but your brain doesn't know what to do with it. Intellectually, you do, but emotionally, you don't.
Yes.
And so the net result of The God Virus, my goal was to help people gain a pathway to understand how religion impacts them without their knowledge, in a very unconscious, subconscious way.
Yes. Wow.
And I don't know if is that satisfying you, or
That's
where
a
you want to
great
go?
Summary.
Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that you're able to draw on all of those, like, it's not just from a biological, psychological, but the anthropology, the sociology, and bringing all of that in, I think helps to sort of build a bigger picture for many people, because I think so many people don't actually understand the unconscious influences of religion in all aspects of our society, whether you're religious or not religious. I think people think, but I'm not religious, so therefore it doesn't impact me. And yet the way our society functions is religious. It has religious foundations and religion all through it, whether people claim to be religious or not. And I think for people who are not religious, they wouldn't really have an awareness of that. I think a lot of people who are atheist or secular, as we use that term, believe that, the way the Western world, certainly here in Australia, works is, we're not a religious country. And yet if you look at the way our legal system operates, the way our education system operates, the way our healthcare system operates, it's all infused with religion.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
It's right there.
Now,
and people, we might not discuss it enough or expose it enough, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the important thing about the title of the book is The God Virus, but the subtitle is just as important: How Religion Infects Our Lives and Culture.
Yes.
And it's that culture is just as important as the lives part of it.
Great.
So to a great degree, remember, beginning with the notion of the civil religion, which was the core chapter of the entire book, I look at how religions infect entire cultures. Now, I won't say I'm the best prophet, but I am I'm an above average prophet, because I prophesied the shit that we're going through in the United States way back when I wrote that book. If you read The God Virus with keeping in mind what's happening, right, with Donald Trump and MAGA and evangelical Christianity, you'll see everything explained in the book. Now, of course, I didn't prophesy it would be nearly this bad. So that's a pretty bad prophet. But
Yeah. I
It's
don't
been
think anybody
worse.
anticipated that.
Wow.
I could say I told you so to speak.
Yeah.
It's really gotten bad. And at very beginning of the book, I have some quotes from Jerry Falwell and some other major evangelical people saying basically we want to get rid of the entire education system and get so we can put Jesus in our school. Well, that's what's happening right now. We're seeing entire states trying to inject creationism into Oklahoma, for example, or Texas. I mean, I know not everybody we're listening to this is from the U.S., but the examples are rampant.
Yeah.
And the very first damn chapter of the whole book's where I talk about that's their goal. And that was in 2009, I wrote the book.
Yeah.
Well, they're achieving their goal now in 2025.
Yeah. I'm curious, Darrel, what was the reaction to the book when it first came out? I mean, I guess there would have been obviously different reactions, but I'm curious about what was the kind of overarching reaction from religious people. Was there a lot of kind of, controversy around it? Because it would have been quite a controversial book then, being the first of its kind.
Well, I didn't get a lot of pushback. I didn't get too many death threats or anything, you're going to hell kind of stuff. Okay. I think what happened was the previous 4 books had kind of plowed the way for me. So Hawkins had taken all the heat and Harris had taken all the heat.
Right.
The heat was gone by the time I got in there. Plus, I'm talking about something much more personal. I'm not just criticizing religion. I'm showing how it works. And so what I got from people, I mean, I literally was overwhelmed sometimes with the number of emails coming in and other things like letters. I mean, I got snail mail letters from people saying that the God virus changed my life, or wow, that explains why I feel the way I am, or how I got into this cult. That's what I got. That's the response was not from Christians. Okay. It was from people who had the courage to read the damn book.
Yeah.
I had a woman that just kind of an acquaintance, and I was looking for somebody. When I write a book, of course I use editors. I get a good editor or two, but I also like to get the target audience. I try to find some people that are in my target audience, and I see if I can get them to read it. So I printed a dozen copies of the manuscript, unedited. It still had lots of editing. And one of the people that I gave it to was a woman I was acquainted with. I didn't know her very well, but she expressed an interest, and she was a good Christian. So I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. I wasn't looking for Christians because that's not the target audience necessarily. So I gave it to her. About a month later, she calls me up and said, Darrel, I'm an atheist.
Wow. Yeah.
What? I thought you were a Christian. Said, no, I got to chapter 4 and realized I'm an atheist.
Nice.
Didn't even read the whole book. She said, by chapter 4, I was an atheist.
Yeah.
Oh.
Nice.
Wow, that's powerful.
That is incredible.
She did finish reading the book, and then she, of course, wanted to read the edited edition too when it finally came out.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I got that feedback a lot during the early 2 or 3 years of the book being out. Once the book got out and people started reading it, the word got around about it. I did not have to do much publicity. The sales just started going. In fact, we sold out the first printing real quick. And so I ended up, podcasting was just getting started in 2009 or so. And I had podcasters calling. I didn't know what a podcast was. But I had a podcaster call me up and say, hey, I want to review your book. I want to interview you after I read your book. Would you send me a free copy for review? I thought, I'm going to send you a free copy of my book. I don't know. So I refused. I refused to send him a free copy of my book.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was or what he was doing.
Yeah.
And a couple months later, he calls me up and says, I've read your book. I want to interview you now. And that's when I learned what a podcast was and that he was serious.
So he actually bought your book.
I mean,
so you knew he was serious.
You know, it costs a couple of dollars to support the author.
Yeah, true.
Come on.
I don't know how he got the book, but he did. But he had a number of those kind of stories happen along the way.
Wow.
And that just made me realize, okay, this book has a market, and there are people who want to read it.
Yeah.
The reviews, if you just look, I got hundreds and hundreds of 5-star reviews, but I like to go look at the 1-star reviews. Almost any book I'm going to buy. If you go look at the 1-star review, they'll tell you a lot, because they're almost all Muslims that say I don't know what I'm talking about, or fundamentalist Christians that say I'm going to go to hell.
Oh.
That's fun.
Okay.
Those 1-star reviews are actually 5 stars as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes. You can reframe those.
They're very, very, I mean, I've read every review in that on Amazon and on Goodreads, and there's almost nothing that deals with real substantive issues.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's a hugely compelling idea to describe religion and God and these ideas as a memeplex. I think that's the term that Dawkins uses, right? It's like a collection of ideas that travel together across space and time, and the host is the human mind. Because our cats don't believe it, and our dogs don't believe it, right? They're impacted by it, but they don't believe it.
Yeah.
So the host is the human mind, and our capacity for storytelling and fictions in particular. I guess that's the word that Yuval Noah Harari uses a lot, like fictions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, there's a lot that we could explore about this topic. I'm sure we could do an entire 3-hour interview just about this topic. But one thing in particular that I find fascinating is defense mechanisms. So like any virus would have a means by which it defends itself against the immune system of the host. And, psychologically, mentally, our defense mechanisms against the virus of God and religion is skepticism, is it not? So just the ability to think critically. And so I guess just one question I want to ask you, Darrel, is in your book or in your work, like what comments would you have about the defense mechanisms that are installed into these religious memplexes, the self-preservation mechanisms?
Well, there's two aspects to that. First, I'm going to talk about is identity. It's like in a disease, a real virus or a real parasite. The parasite or the virus finds the weak spot of the organism, and attaches itself in that weak spot. Well, the weak spot of our brains is identity. So what religions do is they kind of infect that part of our brain that helps us form our identity. So now when someone would criticize the religion that I espouse, it feels like an attack on my identity.
Yes.
That's a very powerful defense mechanism. Even though we don't think of it as a defensive mechanism, you're protecting your identity. But in protecting your identity, you're actually protecting the God virus. You're protecting a religion. The second aspect of that is that within viruses themselves, viruses have protections against other viruses. For example, cowpox is what we use or used to use with Dr. Jennings back in the 1700s when he created the smallpox vaccination. He discovered that cowpox makes you immune to smallpox. So in other words, the cowpox virus protects itself and protects its host against the smallpox virus. And there's a number of examples of these throughout biology. I mentioned the things I pull my book together with. What I didn't mention was biology. There's a lot of biology in my book too. And that's why we're talking right now about viruses. So what happens is the religion puts together defenses against its being attacked, one being identity. But on the other side, it's also saying, I was taught that Catholics are going to hell. I was taught that other religions are are horrible. So those are learned defense mechanisms against that protect the religion that's in me. So there's two different ways that religion defends you against infection with another religion or no religion. Does that answer your question,
Yes.
Shawn?
Yeah.
Yes, very powerfully. So identity being one, like the moment we perceive an attack on our sense of identity, as you point out, like almost subconsciously, there's this knee-jerk reaction to push back without really considering the substance of what's being said.
Right.
Because it feels very personal, doesn't it?
So, sorry.
Because that part of your brain is what's been infected. It's not personal, but it feels impersonal.
Yeah. When you criticize my religion, you're criticizing me.
Yeah, my sense of self, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's very few things. When I write a book, my goal is to have that book be viable for at least 5 years, and all the science be viable for at least 5 years. So I do a lot of research, make sure I'm not any new age bullshit stuff coming into it. But there's very few things I would change about the God virus. I think it today is as valuable and viable today as it was the day I wrote it, with the exception that I think I could have tied identity much better into the book than I did. I hardly touched on identity then, and I should have done better with that. Second thing I would change or add is I'd probably add a whole chapter on identity, and I'd probably add a whole chapter on afterlife fear of hell, fear of Armageddon, that sort of stuff. But the reason I didn't put those in, or didn't even think to put those in, is because I hadn't had the experience that I've had since then. The experience of watching our clients come in with these issues has led me to understand much more deeply what identity, how identity fits into the whole big picture.
Yes.
And as well as afterlife fears. And have you seen my latest talk on religious trauma? You probably haven't. It's actually not. It's not available. Sorry, you couldn't see it. But
okay.
Yeah, I explore this a lot more in my latest talk. But so anyway, those would be two things I'd add to the book. Otherwise, everything's good. I wouldn't change a word of the whole book.
Amazing. And one thing I'm seeing, Darrel, with you, a personal parallel as it is, because you've explored in your story how at multiple juncture points in your life, you've been more or less comfortable with a transition of identity. And I think many people who come out of religion, a key thing that makes that successful is the ability to just let go a little bit of their identity, right? To say like, okay, these are beliefs that I hold. They're not beliefs that I am.
Good point. Very good point. Yep.
And I'm also seeing a connection with many of us would love to try to persuade our believing family and friends to not believe. And so a good starting point, if you can even successfully start a conversation, might be to just reassure them that you're not here to attack their identity, but that you just want to talk about some of the things they believe.
Yeah. Beliefs and identity are hard to separate for many people.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I mean, you could lead with that, but it may not be successful. Is what I'm saying, right?
I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, but you can try, right?
Yeah.
Because at least, because I'm thinking you've unpacked those two defense mechanisms. So how do you bypass them when discussing religion with someone? I'm not trying to attack your identity. Of course, that doesn't mean they won't perceive it as an attack. It's because that's how it works, right? Yeah. No, that's incredible. Well, thank you for sharing that about the God virus. I'm sure you could speak a lot more about it. Before we move on to your second book, is there anything else you want to point out from that book?
No, I think that covered pretty much. Thanks.
So we encourage all of our listeners, go buy a copy.
Go buy that book first. Or
Voice read by the author.
Of course.
Yeah.
So can you do something similar then, Darrel, on your second book around religion, sex and God? Can you give us a little bit of a summary of that, please?
Yeah, well, the fifth chapter of the God virus is about sex and the God virus. And that one chapter seemed to light people up. I got more comments, more emails, more, I would go around giving lectures on the God virus at colleges and various groups and all. I was on the speaker circuit for several years. I was very successful at getting people to let me come talk. They wouldn't pay me, but they would love for me to talk.
Yeah.
But that's what you do when you're you're an author just trying to get your book out. And what I really worked hard to get the message out about sex and God, and the God virus too. But the 5th chapter seemed to really touch people in a way that I hadn't anticipated. Now, I've been a sex therapist in some form or other for much of my career. Yes, I was an organizational psychologist, but when it's you don't think I would be dealing with sexual issues, but occasionally that did happen, and sometimes I even had clients come to me secretly because they didn't want to go to somebody else or whatever. But so that was really important for them to find somebody who could talk openly, especially a male, because I had a lot of men that just couldn't. And I didn't get a lot of females, but I got a lot of males. And that led me to write part of that, the chapter 5. Anyway, as a result of that, I realized there isn't just one chapter. It's kind of like the way the God virus started. There isn't just one chapter here. There's a whole book. Mm. And I had read, in my lifetime, I've read so many books on sex and sexuality and sex therapy. And, oh, by the way, Dr. Albert Ellis was the preeminent sex therapist in the entire world, probably for a good, through the 1950s and 60s. So I learned, and he would set up there in a training session, and every other word was fuck and damn and shit. And I hear, I'm a good Christian. I don't swear. Did you know I'm a good Christian? I don't fucking swear. Did you know that?
No, I don't fucking swear either. How about you, Shawn?
Fuck no.
So I'm trying to solve this cognitive dissonance I've got between here's one of the greatest therapists in the world, and I'm trying to learn from him, but he's swearing all over the place, and I can't swear because it's against Jesus and that sort of stuff. Not only that, but he then goes into the subject of masturbation. There's 400 people in this room, and he's talking out loud about masturbation. I've never seen this before. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I mean, I hope he doesn't ask me.
Picking people out of the audience to ask them about their masturbation.
Yeah.
How are you going?
Yeah, how are you going? Twice a week?
And then he says, somebody asked him a question. How would you know if somebody's got a sex addict or not if they masturbate 2 or 3 times a day? He said, well, I have a client who masturbates 12 times a day, and he seems pretty normal to me.
Love it.
So at that moment, I realized,
I envy anyone who can achieve 12 times a day. I mean, that's quite good. He must have won some kind of gene lottery. I'm
sitting there listening to him talking. I'm thinking to myself, well, damn, I've done 6 or 7 times sometimes. So in that process, and this was in the mid 70s, I'm getting exposed to this. And of course, I go into work as adolescent boys. Well, they're all masturbating. I've got 15 client boys on my caseload, and they're all, and I've got staff members who are shaming them and are telling me you can't masturbate, or I caught so-and-so masturbating, I want to punish him. Well, I've got to educate my staff on sexuality, but they're all religious. I mean, this is a institution that's out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, surrounded by farms, and all the employees, go home and feed the chickens when they get back. They don't know anything about human sexuality. So I have to learn this shit. And then I've got 2 kids of my own, and my kids are starting to grow up. I have to figure out how am I going to educate my kids. So I get Boys and Sex and Girls and Sex, written by, I can't remember his name. He's the student of Kinsey, Alfred Kinsey's. And they're really good books for teenagers or pubescent and prepubescent kids. So I use those to educate my kids. So, of course, I read them myself. And I also have to take training because I'm working with these kids on human sexuality. So I'm getting the latest training throughout the 70s and the 80s on human sexuality. It's always been an interest of mine since since the day my mom walked in on me at 12 years old and caught me masturbating. And she patted me on the shoulder and said, "That's all right, Darrel, you won't do it when you get married." And I'm fond of saying she was half right. It was perfectly normal, and I did do it when I got married. I'm a lifelong masturbator, and I'm not afraid to admit it or talk about it out loud. In fact, if you ever come to one of my talks about sex and sexuality, I always start with, "I masturbate, how many of you?" We'll find out real quick how many liars there are in the group. Right?
I heard this quote that I really love: "Death is the final orgasm." That's for people who, have that sex positive attitude.
There you go. Let's go for that. I like that. So when I saw the response to chapter 5, I thought, okay, I have a whole nother book to write here. And the book was here in my head. I just had to sit down and write it. And when I start writing a book, I usually, from the day I start till the day it's finished, is like 5 months. And then I hand it over to the editor. And, it's another couple of months getting edits and all. But in this case, I got to what later became chapter 12, I believe, in the Sex and God. And I saw there's no research on atheist sex. I thought, well, there's nothing. I want to know what atheists think about sex and how good their sex life. And more importantly, I want to know what happens to people when they leave a religion to their sex lives. What was their sex life like before they left religion? What happened after religion? There was no research like that. So I found an undergraduate student that would work with me, and together we put together a very comprehensive online survey that we put out in 2011. And it was the first time nobody had ever done this before. We worked. We tested the survey questions on a few hundred people and make sure it's what you do, when you're trying to make sure the questions are right. And then when we're finished, we eliminated, reworded, there's a lot of things you do to make sure it hits where you want it to hit. And it's statistically viable too. She called me up the night before we were to release it. And she said, "Darrel, I don't know if you realize it, but we've got 69 questions." And I said, "Well, that sounds about right." He said, "You sure you want to put out 69 questions?" I said, "Sounds exactly right, actually." So we put it out with 69 questions. And 14,590 people responded to that survey. I was shocked. I was absolutely blown away. I was hoping for a few hundred.
Nice.
And our requirements were, we don't want any Christians. We are not interested in you. We're interested only in people who are currently secular, preferably atheists. And we ask a lot of questions about were you raised religious? What religion were you raised in? How much guilt were you taught? How much shame were you taught in that religion? And 69 different questions. Do you masturbate? How many times? Did you have premarital sex? Are you gay? Are you bisexual? Are you trans? We ask all the questions. And at the end of that, we got this enormous database of 14,590 people that were now atheists, and they were talking to us. And 80% of them had been raised in some religion. 20% were raised atheists. So, so we had a comparison group. We could compare people who are religious against people who were never raised religious.
Yeah.
That stopped my writing of the book by 3 months. It took me 3 months out of my writing process. So it actually took me longer to write Sex and God because we stopped to do that research. But I'm so glad I did it, because then we then released it to the public. You can go online and find it. It's 45 pages long with all sorts of graphs. I mean, so much learning. We learned a whole lot through that. In fact, I still give talks about it today because it tells us so much about the comparison between people raised non-religious and people who were raised religious. Yeah. That it ended up being one chapter of only about 5 or 6 pages. We only put the most critical things in that. So I encourage people, if you read the book, go get the full report, because there's so much really, really interesting. For example, what's the most guilt, what religion preaches and teaches the most guilt to people? What's your best guess? Religion that's commonly found in the United States. Let's put it that way.
I mean, I would say Roman Catholicism.
Oh, what do you think, Shawn?
Gosh, I think it's hard to quantify what is the most guilt. Is that like the people who responded to the survey expressed higher degrees of guilt than other religions?
Scale of 1 to 10, how much guilt did you experience as a whatever religion? That's what the question we asked.
That was it. Right. Wow.
And then we asked what religion were you raised, and we correlated that.
Yes. Yes. Wow.
What would your guess be, Shawn?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I honestly don't know. Like, I don't have great intuitions. I was going to say Baptist.
Okay.
But yeah, no, tell us, please.
All right. Mormon, number one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, there you go.
Oh.
No.
Jehovah's Witness, number 2.
Oh.
Pentecostals, number 3. Seventh-day Adventists, number 4. And those top 4 are way above everybody else. Catholics are way down there, as are Baptists.
Wow.
Yeah, it's would think Unitarians though are clear at the bottom. They have no guilt or shame.
No way.
That is so interesting.
It was enlightening to see that we could quantify shame and guilt.
Yes.
By religion. We now know which religions teach the most shame and guilt against other religions, including Catholics. I mean, Catholics were up there, but they just weren't at the top. Like,
Yeah.
That's remarkable. I mean, I knew I was raised in one of the top, but I didn't realize it was the top.
Yep.
That's remarkable. That's amazing
Such
data.
interesting. Oh, yes. I'm going to go and find that paper and read it.
If you read Sex and God, again, there's a lot of anthropology in there. And what I found, what I put in there is, before I wrote Sex and God, I read I read a whole bunch of other stuff, of course, but I read the great book Sex at Dawn. I don't know if you read that book. Sex at Dawn's a great book. I love it.
Ryan, yeah.
And I kind of tried to take the lead of some of the stuff they talked about. I wasn't trying to replicate that book, but I did take some ideas from the book and wove it into the Sex and God. But it was really important to see that, as you kind of already mentioned, Sally-Ann, we are a fish swimming in polluted water, but we don't even know it. Yeah. We're in a culture that's polluted with Christianity. You may think you're a secular culture, but all these other institutions are heavily and have been heavily influenced by religion throughout centuries. Yes. So when I tell people you are a Christian sexual, even though you're in Australia, you're a Christian sexual when you're living in Texas, because the laws and the mores and the taboos that you adhere to are Christian.
Yes.
If I took you out of Perth, Australia, and put you in the Mangadian Islands of the South Pacific, and raised you there, you would have an entirely different view of human sexuality. Yeah. The unrecognizable view of sexuality. Yeah. So bring a lot of religion, the Na culture in China, the Muoso culture in China, and the Hadza culture in Africa, and the Mangadian culture and the Hawaiian culture. All these cultures have a sexuality that is unrecognizable to us.
Yeah.
Cultures that have no word for father, no word for marriage. That's the Na culture, where women may have as many sex partners as they want throughout their lifetime, and nobody cares. There's just so many different, or the Hawaiian culture, before contact by Captain Cook, you could get your head cut off in Hawaii for eating the wrong food, but who you fucked didn't matter. Nobody cared. There wasn't even the concept of marriage, except in the royalty. Royalty had marriage. So there's all these things that we think it's normal to be monogamous. It's more normal to not have sex before marriage. It's normal to not masturbate. No, that's abnormal. All these things are abnormal. You look at the bigger context of human sexuality over thousands of years and other cultures.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm personally very fascinated by this topic, and I think Sex at Dawn was a great book. Sometimes I've thought if an alien anthropologist, or just imagine some advanced alien society, and there's someone doing their PhD, and they send them off to Earth to orbit Earth in an invisible spaceship and study human sexuality. And his supervisor is like 10 light years away. He's observing humans. What would he say? And it would probably be something like, they claim to be a monogamous a species, but they're not.
They're managing it very well.
Yeah, it would probably be something like that, right? It would just be like, he would study what we say, and then he would study what we do, and then it would be, again, looking at it from a purely intellectual standpoint without all the cultural taboos.
Right.
So, wow, that's amazing.
So my goal with Sex and God was to just simply open people's eyes up to how much they've been infected with Christian sexuality. And in my talks, I say I'm not a Christian sexual, I'm not a Muslim sexual, I'm not a Mormon sexual, I'm a secular sexual. And when you think about what does that mean, it means I don't adhere to the strictures that this culture forces on us. Among many things, for example, I've been polyamorous for 25 years, and I'm open about that. And I'm not afraid to talk about being masturbating or having sex before marriage. Before I was actually married, I had a sex partner and those kinds of things. I think it's for us seculars, all of us. I think it's important for us to come out as atheists. We've talked about that. We've been using this language for 20 years. You got to be out as an atheist to normalize it.
Yes.
Well, I think you should also be out as a secular sexual. Normalize the fact that, I don't adhere to Christian sexual. If somebody wants to be married to somebody for life, I don't care. That's their business, and I'm happy if they can do that. But that is not normal. Lifelong marriage was for 10 or 15 years, 5,000 years ago, because both of you were probably dead by 30 or 35 years of age. Nobody lived to be 80, and nobody had 50-year marriages. That's just unheard of, almost. So anyway, I can preach on that forever.
Yes. No, and you have in many forums. I think that's one of the topics that you touch on most in the interviews that I've seen you do.
Yep.
No, that's great. So Sex and God, also warmly recommend it to our audience in case they haven't checked it out. And as you said, it's read in your voice, the audiobook, and available in print and on Kindle. So, okay, great. We've touched on those two topics, and now we're over to the third. Darrel, do we have a third book in the making with the next topic? Religious trauma, how religion passes trauma down the generations.
Well, no, I don't think I'm not going to write another book. I've got too many other irons in the fire. I don't even have time to tell you all the other stuff I'm up to right now. And writing another book is not one of them.
Okay.
It takes a lot of energy, time, finances. There are a lot of things that goes into writing a book that nobody thinks about. You think just hit a button, print it, and it goes out.
Yeah,
it's not like that. Besides that, I think I take stock of where I am in my life. I'm 75 years old. I've probably got 5 or 10 good years if I'm lucky. What do I want to do with those years? Books are influential, but I think what we are doing, and I mean you as well as I, are doing with Recovery from Religion has a lot more impact on the planet and on the people that need us than any book I could ever write. So I'll leave writing other books, like Steve Jacata's just wrote a good book. I'll leave it to them and other people like Steve to write books, get the word out, and talk about that. So that's my goal is to focus my energy in a place I think is going to have maximum impact, and it's not writing books. So what I've been doing the last couple of years is working on religious trauma. In fact, when I did my tour, I talked religious trauma quite a bit.
Yep. Is that in the UK or your Australian tour? Are you saying both of them?
Australia. Oh no, when I came to Australia, I was talking about religious trauma.
Yeah.
However, the talk I give now and the talk I gave in the United Kingdom was a derivative of the one that I did in Australia. and I'm going to say what I'm doing now is much better. I'm sorry you guys were the guinea pigs.
Oh, well.
That's all right.
We'll just have to come back and give it again, talk again.
I would do it in a heartbeat. I would. It is a much better talk, and it'll be available soon. United Kingdom, UK Humanists put on a conference and they videotaped it, but they haven't released it yet. But it has a whole different angle, I think a much more hard-hitting angle on what religious trauma is and why it's so important for us to look at closely. It's not just, as we see in recovering from religion, when people leave religion, they may not feel like they were traumatized by the religion. I don't feel like I was traumatized by my religion at all. But when you leave and you lose your family, you lose your children disown you, your parents disown you, you may lose a job, you may be forced to get divorced. All these things hit you, and generally hit you all at once. That's where the trauma happens, as you well know. I'm speaking to the choir for our volunteers, of course. And I want to examine that because people say, for example, some uneducated therapists will say, well, do you think your depression is because you're an atheist? As opposed, do you think your depression because you lost your entire support system when you left the church? Therapists, many therapists, you well know, Sally-Ann, are not educated in this area. And even well-meaning therapists who themselves are still spiritual or religious themselves can't keep that shit out of their therapy sessions. So I'm here to educate people about what it is, how we look at it, how we may treat it. And I'm very happy with the way it's being I've constructed it now.
Okay.
But I want to go back. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you because when you mentioned that you wanted to talk about how religion passes trauma down the generations, I thought that was something slightly different from the idea that you can be traumatized by the transition out of religion. I sort of saw those as two separate topics.
They are. Absolutely, they are. So I've only hit one side. I was getting ready to go to the second.
Yeah, okay, keep going.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I told you my story begins in 1929. Mm-hmm. Actually, probably my story, I lied. My story probably starts about 1921 or 22, but in my own family. That's when my grandmother at 12 years old had to deal with a very abusive alcoholic father and him stealing all the family's money to drink and leaving the family poor and poverty stricken in 1921, 22, that time frame. My grandmother then, she was born in 1909. So by the time 1928 comes around, she falls in love with a man named Thompson. And they get married. And they have a baby. And that baby is my father. That was 28. My father was born in 1929. By 1930, though, she had left Thompson. She'd left my grandfather, Thompson, who was my biological grandfather, and had moved in with another man named Bill Ray and was literally living with him in 1930. Now, the way we know this, we only found this out recently because she hid all of this from us. She didn't hid all of it. She hid key details from us, just put it that way. We could not talk about this with my grandmother. She would have disowned us if we said anything about her previous marriage or anything like that. So we found in doing some research on our ancestry, what we find is in the 1930 census, my grandmother is reported as married to Thompson. In the same census, the census shows my grandmother living with Bill Ray. So within one census, she's counted twice. Interesting. Yeah. It's counted twice. We also have a marriage license for her to be married to Thompson, but there is no marriage license for Ray. Fast forward to 1940 or 41, my grandmother gets religion with a vengeance, fundamentalist evangelical kind of religion. And she decides, I better get divorced. So she goes through these steps of getting divorced from my real grandfather, Thompson. but she never marries my adopted grandfather, Bill Ray. Never marries him. Yet she goes through life, and he becomes country church preacher. Here's a picture of my grandfather with my grandson and me. He lived to be 99 years and 1 month old. We called him Pappy. He was a good grandfather to me. He was the only grandfather I knew on my dad's side. And he was a country church preacher for 45 years. My grandmother was his companion, and they refused to let us celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. So why would that be? Because they never got married.
Way.
Yet she would condemn anybody who got divorced. She was the first one to call you a sinner for drinking alcohol, having sex outside marriage, or getting divorced.
But
she was a major
married.
They never got married. And she took 11 years to get divorced from Thompson.
Oh, and did other people know that she and Bill Ray weren't married? Was this a well-known fact, or was that hidden?
It was hidden. Even her sister, we knew her sister. I knew her sister. Even she did not know this. Her sister knew about Thompson and Bill.
Yeah, sure.
But she didn't know that my granny had never married Pappy, Bill Ray. But the reason I bring all this up was she got religion with a vengeance. Now, you may not know anything about Dr. Kellogg and circumcision, but back in the 1890s, he was pushing circumcision as a way to stop adolescent boys from masturbating, and girls. He believed in female genital mutilation as well. Nobody talks about that, but he did. It didn't go over very well, so we don't have that to pay, but we do still have male circumcision in the United States. Well, she got religion. She somehow got the idea in her head that my dad, who had never been circumcised, had to get circumcised because of her religion. So and I don't know who did it, but my dad tells me this story, so I know it directly from the victim, if you will. She took him at 12 years of age to a doctor and said, "You to circumcise him," and he did with no anesthesia. So my father got his penis cut at 12 years old with no anesthesia to stop him from masturbating. That's what Dr. Kellogg was putting forth at the time. So my grandmother was traumatized by an abusive father. She is ashamed of her marital situation such that she condemns everybody else and projects that onto them. She doesn't get divorced for 11 years. And when she does, she doesn't marry, and she keeps that a secret. And then she forces my dad to get circumcised. And then my dad gets married in 1949, 48, I guess, late 48. And I'm born in 1950. My grandmother, my youngest brother, is born in 1955. My grandmother, Granny, is babysitting and changing the diapers of my newborn baby, a brother, Jeff, my fourth boy in the family. He's probably less than a year old, probably 6 months. I don't know. He's pretty young. I was only about 5 myself at the time, or maybe 5.5. As she's changing his diapers, he reaches down as an infant, 6 months old, and touches his penis, which is boys are prone to do at any age. And she slaps his hand away.
God.
I mean, I'm sitting within 5 feet of her while she slaps his hand away. It's like it happened yesterday. I've got that memory. So why would she slap his hand away? Except that she had some traumas going on there.
Shameful experience. Yeah.
I don't think my infant brother would know anything about that. He probably doesn't have any memory of that, but I do. I watched it.
Yeah.
So she's taking her sexual beliefs and ideas and imposing those on my father.
Yes.
My father then has a baby, has 4 babies actually, and I get this message put on to me.
Yeah.
Dad then is married to my mother. They're married for over 50 years. And my dad and my mom both have sexual problems for many years. And what I learned when I'm about 30 years old, my dad tells me this whole story. And many of those sexual problems go back to him being circumcised. and shame that my grandmother had taught him. And he is dealing with that trauma. He passes it on. I see it. I get messages about masturbation being wrong and all. So what I'm showing you here is with my own family. This is religious trauma being passed down, not just through some of the things we've talked about, shunning and all that, but through sexuality.
Yeah.
And it's a strong theme throughout my family. So you get into my youngest brother, the one that had his hand slapped, and he becomes an alcoholic and a drug addict. How much is that a response to the trauma?
Yeah.
Some trauma that he experienced. I doubt if it was from that having his hand slapped
that
away,
one incident. But yeah, the theme is that it's based on shame, isn't it?
It's all shame based, and shame itself can be really, really trauma inducing.
Yes. Wow.
So the reason I think my own family is a great example of this trauma being passed down from my grandmother to my father, to me, to my brothers.
Yeah.
I think I got it stopped. My children don't seem to be traumatized or have any issues around this. My son or my daughter, either one. But it could have, if I had picked up on the religious ideas and propagated them, it could have gone a fourth generation.
Yeah.
So reason I'm so incredibly interested in this is because I see many of our clients coming to us with traumas, but they don't know where they come from, or they don't understand that it came not from their religious training maybe, but from their parents or from their grandparents being passed down through the family. The shame of being divorced, the shame of being unmarried to somebody, the shame of not having your child circumcised when you think that's the thing you should have done. I mean, these things are insidious. They reside in our heads, and they make us behave in inappropriate and irrational ways that hurts ourselves and other people. Yeah. So that's the short version.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good example. I'm now picking up on your theme of trauma being passed down the generations, and my mind is going down to all sorts of examples. Like, you've only isolated one small aspect of sexuality and trauma being passed down, but I was just thinking of one. I could give you another example that is just totally different, but still along the same theme. So, my grandparents had only 2 kids, and they were pretty happy with those 2 kids. And then the Mormon missionaries knocked on the door and converted them, and then they persuaded them to have more kids, because that's what God wants you to do, to have more kids. And so they did, but they didn't have the means to have more kids. And so those kids grew up in a more stressful environment, and with their parents being less available for their needs. And of course, I'm speaking to 2 people highly qualified in psychology and counseling, especially with regards to attachment. Like, we know young children have a great need of attunement and attachment from their caregivers. You need to have a lot of available time and space and energy to take care of a child such that their psychological needs will be met. And what I see in my dad's side of the family is that the older siblings are really well attached. Like, they're very stable, emotionally stable, good. But as you go down the siblings, you get less, more and more anxious, more and more emotionally unregulated, those kinds of things. And, Mormonism obviously persuades people to have more kids. And so you can have this phenomenon where parents are having more kids, and, put aside financial needs for a second, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But even just talk about attachment needs of their kids. How on earth is a woman in Utah with 12 children going to pass on good attachment skills to 12 kids? It doesn't matter how superhuman or what a great mom you are. You just don't have the time and the energy to raise 12 kids like that. In fact, going back to Christopher Ryan in his second book, Civilized to Death, I'm not sure if you've read that one, Darrel, but he speaks about research amongst hunter-gatherers and young children, and anthropologists showing that babies would be passed around an awful lot to all of the aunties in the community. So even the primary caregiver mother would probably take care of their baby 40% of the time. Just think about, and you think about postpartum depression as potentially a side effect of one person having to take care of one child all the time. And we talk about what's unnatural and doesn't, it doesn't marry well with our human needs. That's just one of countless examples, right? So, back to my point, like if you're part of a religion that persuades you to have more children, then one of the consequences of that is that you're going to have children who then grow up with difficult attachment or various attachment trauma because their parents were either too busy, too stressed. Even I'm just looking at the more benign interpretations. I'm not talking about abusive or neglectful. I'm just saying tired, like really tired parents who have no energy for attuned play with a young child. And the religion then encourages that. And so you can see that gets passed down the generations and generations of people who have more kids than they have the energy and resources to raise very well. And the religion just keeps teaching them to do that. And I think that's just another example. I think if we sat here for another 3 hours, we could come up with tons of examples for your next book.
And I'm not going to be writing.
You're not going to write. I guess we'll have to write it, Sally-Ann.
I will say
yes,
this:
I think you will, Shawn.
When my book, when my talk comes out, you're going to love it because I deal 1/3 of the talk is around attachment.
Oh, great!
And
yeah,
I see that as there's a triad, like a three-legged stool that I look at, and attachment's one of those three legs, dealing with religious trauma.
Yeah.
Well, and I think with the study of epigenetics now as well, I think that's fascinating that we're seeing trauma being passed down genetically, without any sort of necessary sort of attachment or behavioral kind of treatment or responses, to see that it's actually being passed down from generation to generation through the genes. I think it gives us even more knowledge and information about, understanding when people come to see us in therapy, or we have people coming to us in groups in recovering from religion, to have that deep understanding that people might not know where the trauma has come from. And that's not always necessary to know, but I think understanding that there are various ways that people can become traumatized in a religious way. It's not just through being in a church or being in a cult or particular teachings. There are so many other ways for that to occur.
Yeah.
Epigenetically, that I think there's a massive amount of research available there, and more we're starting to see it in animal models. It's pretty clear, and so we can be pretty sure it's happening in humans as well. That's a good point. I don't emphasize that much, Sally, and I think it's a really good point.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's incredible. So here we are in 2025 as the inheritors of religion, and it's been around in our society in various forms for a very, very long time. And so it's mind-boggling to imagine the scale of the trauma that has been handed down generation to generation. And I think your example of circumcision is a really poignant one, because it's a very visceral and very personal thing. And I'm aware, I don't know if you've seen the documentary American Circumcision, but it's all about circumcision in America, as the name suggests. And it's a tragic thing that that is so obviously passed down at a very young age, and that they explore it a lot in that documentary. It's absolutely tragic. And I have to take the moment to point out hypocrisy too. So you started your presentation by talking about hypocrisy and sort of blind spots, intellectual and emotional blind spots in religious thought. I think one of the greatest examples of hypocrisy on the religious right is circumcision, because the religious right sort of hates and preys upon and is disgusted by trans people. It says, well, you can't do any surgery to your genitals to change anything about your sexuality or your physical body, And yet routinely, we're talking, 80 to 90% will perform a surgery on a newborn baby who's not consenting, as you said, in many instances without even anesthesia.
Yeah,
and it's a blind spot that is so large and looming. It's an elephant in the room. The moment you mention it, it's like, what? You say people can't perform any surgery on their genitals, and yet routinely you'll do exactly that to your babies.
Yeah.
It's so fucking obvious.
Isn't it? When you point it out, it's like, what?
Only an elephant? I've never heard of elephants.
It is the most tragic thing, and that's one of the things that saddens me most about religion, is how it is a giant blind spot in people's minds. The inability to think critically about certain ideas is a massive blind spot, and it causes harm, and that harm is passed on.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm picking up on that, really. As Shawn was saying that, Darrel, what I'm thinking about is your kind of awareness from a young age. You had an ability to think critically. And I think that's a real, as you're saying, you don't know where that came from, but you had it. You had that ability to sort of think outside of what you were just being told, or the messaging you were receiving, or the way you were being treated, what you were hearing around you. And I think for many, many people, it's that ability to think critically that religion does not allow us to, in most cases. That's not something that we're encouraged to do. In fact, we're really discouraged to think critically. And I think when a person starts to learn how to do that, then I think things can change pretty quickly.
I think there's a genetic component to it, and I'm not talking epigenetics. I'm talking, traditional genetics. If you look at the big five personality components, the one component that seems most likely to be non-religious are people who have a score high on openness to new experience and curiosity.
Yeah.
People score low are more likely to be religious.
Conservative. Yeah.
I think what happened is I got the genes for openness to curiosity, openness to new experience and curiosity. I mean, I haven't even mentioned to you that I'm a mountain climber. I've climbed 52 of the highest mountains in the continental United States. And that openness to new experience, I think, comes out there, right? Yeah. And I was 74 years old last year, and I was climbing Mount Yale in Colorado, which is over 14,000 feet high. Anyway, so for some reason, I got that gene and it seems to be genetic. Up to 50% of our personality is clearly tied to genetics. People don't believe me when I say that oftentimes, but it's easy to illustrate. I use the example of dogs, and I'll ask people, how many of you like dogs? And a lot of people raise their hand. I say, well, tell me the personality of a German Shepherd, and they can do it. Tell me the German personality of a Chihuahua, and they can do it. Well, did those animals learn that personality, or is that genetic? And we've got the same genes in us that those dogs do. So half of our personality comes directly from genes, and I think that's where I got lucky. I got the gene for openness to new experience and curiosity. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Sally-Ann, but that's been my experience because I've actually been able to test people in personality testing.
Yes, and it's interesting. When I first learned about that test and I first completed it, I was still religious, and I scored low in openness to experience, as I thought I would. And as time has progressed, and I've gone back and done that test, it's completely different. So, because I've actually learned, but again, naturally, I wouldn't have been open to experience, but I've actually intentionally and consciously decided, okay, that doesn't have to define me. I don't have to just go, oh, well, that's just the way I am. Because I don't want to be like that. I want to be open. I want to be curious. And I mean, that's really what started me on the path to becoming a counsellor, because that's one of the core qualities that you need is curiosity and openness to experience and open-minded and open-hearted. And so now I score very differently on that, which I'm delighted about. I'm very chuffed. I'm very proud of myself for that, because yes, I don't come from a family where, it was certainly because of the environment as well. And so I don't know how much I was born with and how much was the environment, but probably both in my case.
Well, 50% environment. There's another 50% that's not accounted for in the genetics,
Yeah.
and that's what you're doing. You're expanding that component voluntarily.
Exactly. So, yeah.
You should be proud of that. You are taking agency for your own development.
Absolutely. And I think that's one real positive for many people who leave religion, is that just because we've been a particular way and we've believed particular things doesn't mean that we can't change, and doesn't mean that we can't live a very different life than the one that we thought we would be living. In my opinion, and I think for many people I talk about, a much better life, a much more open life, a life that's more joyful and more present in the here and now, rather than living for something that we
imaginary
don't
future.
know about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I think we should rename RFR Stories to Openness Club.
Oh yeah, openness, the Curiosity Club. Oh.
Lovely. Darrel, it's been such a treat to hear your story in as much detail as we have. And I'm really impressed by it. I'm definitely sitting with a lot of it as we speak. I'm busy processing just the incredible journey you've gone through with religion. And can I take this opportunity to say thank you for founding Recovering from Religion?
Yes.
I love volunteering here. And as soon as it came along, as soon as I became aware of it, I knew that that's what I wanted to work in. That's I'd been dabbling in similar things. And I'm really glad you sort of codified it and created this organization. And onwards and upwards.
Well, thank you. I love that you guys are doing the work. I mean, it's great that we're all in this together.
Yeah. Thank you from me too, Darrel, for RFR, because it's been, for myself, coming out of religion, it was such a, there were many things that were helpful, and RFR and the fact that it existed, just that it existed, was just brought me such hope, and sort of a sense of that there are other people out there. So really reduced my sense of isolation. And I love what we're doing as an organisation. I love the fact that we're there for people so that people don't have to be alone. And to me, that's one of the most important parts of a person's recovery. Whatever point they're at, they're not on their own, and there are other people that they can, journey along, whatever their pathway is, but there are other people there who can be with them on that path and support them and care for them so that they're not alone. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And
love
thanks
hearing
for your
that.
time.
Yeah, thanks for your time. So really appreciate it, and we will catch everyone next time. Thank you.
Okay.
Goodbye.
All right. Thanks, Darrel.
Thanks for taking all this time. I really, really enjoy what you're doing here. Keep it up. I think lots of people are going to benefit from hearing these stories.
I hope so.
Great.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for Recovering from Religion Stories Australia. If anything you heard today resonated with you, support is available. Visit recoveringfromreligion.org.au. You'll find all the links in the description. There you'll find a resources library on deconversion, religious trauma, and related topics. Our blog, podcasts, and RFRX talks, a free, confidential 24/7 helpline by phone or live chat, peer support groups online, and in person in some locations, and the Secular Therapy Project, connecting you with vetted secular clinicians. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speakers and don't necessarily reflect the views of Recovering from Religion. You're not alone. Thanks for listening. Be excellent to each other.